Thank you for everyone for joining this evening. Welcome to the July 20th version of the Committee of the Whole meeting. George, you want to take roll call or is everyone out there? I can't tell.
I saw we have all trustees present.
Okay, great. We have all trustees for the record are on it. So let's jump in first on the agenda, or do you want to go ahead, George? You want to set the
Yeah, let
roll?
me go through, since we have a lot more people than usual. I think we have over 40 here tonight. So just go through this real quick. Since COVID-19 and the governor's declarations, we've been holding all of our meetings on Zoom, and we'll continue to do that through July at the least. Couple different things, some housekeeping items as I continue to let people in. A few different ways you could participate. Before the meeting, you're able to send in an email or a letter into my office, and I do have a couple of them I'll read later on. You can view the meeting solely on the Village's YouTube channel. We are streaming on YouTube, and it'll be archived later. And then you'll have an opportunity as well after the meeting. We will archive this video into our Granicus Agenda Center, and it'll be indexed by items. You'll be able to go to each individual item and watch the item as well. That'll be after the meeting with the minutes, and then also you can participate live, which is where you guys are at here today. And I'm going to go through the other public participation processes too. Here's the agenda, how it's set up. We'll go through the discussion items, but as the mayor mentioned, just want to go through some particulars. We don't have, there's opportunities for public comment. I mentioned you could have written in earlier, and you can also participate in this meeting. A little bit of a different meeting. This is a workshop. If anyone's ever been to a committee of the whole in live or in person or online, as we've been having them, there are no public hearings scheduled. No formal action is being made on the agenda. The committee of the whole is really a workshop for the board of trustees and staff to workshop items either before approval or before an item even enters the formal process. So that's what we're doing tonight. There is an audience participation section at the end of the meeting. In the interest of fairness for everybody and making sure they're not on a long meeting if they don't want to be, what we'll do is we will, after the agenda has been discussed by the board and staff and petitioner, if that's the case, then we will open it up after the item, after each individual item. There's 4 on the agenda, and same rules apply. I'll go through that again later on. Same rules apply as if you're a live meeting, but a little bit, a couple other particulars. What we'll have to do is use the raise your hand option. Or don't do it yet because it just might confuse the conversation. Wait till it's time for public comment. And what I'll do is I'll unmute you, call your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak to move the meeting along. But that'll be later on after each individual item tonight, a little bit different than a typical meeting where we have everyone wait to the very end of the meeting. Couple of things, if you're only participating via phone, you can raise your hand by *9 and *6 unmutes your line. But it looks like most people are on Zoom. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to you to start the meeting, and then I'll coordinate from there.
Okay, great. Thanks, George. So first off, we're going to talk about the Lotus design development. Jason, are you going to take the lead on this?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. And I've been asked to kind of begin this by presenting a survey of the planning activities that have taken place in downtown Lemont over the last, well, I said back to 2002, but really back to 1994 and beyond. George, are you my guy there?
Yes, I just as I'm letting more people in the meeting, you're good. If you, I'll kind of follow along with your cadence, and then we'll switch it back over to mine. Go ahead. All
right, thanks. So we start where we always love to start, with the 52 saloons that you see on this map in 1894. This is a Sanborn map. It shows all the buildings that were there in Lemont at the time. And, remarkably, the physical layout of Lemont really hasn't changed much. You see Main Street Canal, the railroads, Stevens Street. It's all in place. So we're really fortunate to have this remarkable historic, listed on the National Register of Historic Places, remarkable historic downtown. And we're excited that people are interested in investing and developing. Over the last 3 years, I think we've seen a resurgence of downtown Lamont with new restaurants coming in, the excitement around the Forge just a quarter mile away. There's a lot of interest in being in downtown Lamont right now, which is a far cry from where we were maybe 5 years ago or so. And again, just another old picture, because I'm a sucker for old pictures. This is downtown Lamont and some earlier date, and you could see again, not much of the physical appearance, especially on Canal Street and Stevens Street, has changed much, which gives us that great character and authenticity for the downtown. We're going to fast forward 100 years from the 1890s to the 1990s. Just discovered this actually when I was reading Lamont's comprehensive plan today. They made mention to this plan in 1994. And for our purposes, this is probably where we begin. This is where the village really started looking at downtown Lamont, seeing the assets that were there. This plan really kind of looks at those assets in the context of what most people are interested in. Peterson's, you could see even as early as 1994, it's number 2 on that map. It was called out as a key element for the transformation of downtown Lamont. And on the next slide, you could see, again, it was a point of emphasis for the community then. And this created this whole wonderful master plan centered around the canal. And on the next slide, you can see this is also where the village's existing sort of infrastructure, streetscape infrastructure for downtown had its genesis in 1994. So those planters, the streetlights, et cetera, all those are start here with this plan. We seem to move in decades. So we jump almost another 10 years up now. And this is where Lamont really begins studying transit-oriented development. In 2002, they worked with the Rapid Transit Authority, or RTA, to create a transit-oriented development plan, as you could see here. The genesis of that is to take your transit assets, in this case, the Heritage Corridor Metro line, and develop mixed-use housing and retail around that transit asset, generally a quarter mile of the station area. So this plan begins in 2002. And by 2004, we have this fabulous Lamont Station area plan, which was done with URS. And this really becomes the blueprint for what happens over the next 5 years or so before the recession. So as part of this plan, you have these concept plans. It calls out key sites again. It's looking within that quarter mile. As George is pointing, Peterson's is there. Interesting enough, at 2004, they didn't anticipate Marquette development, and they don't call out the industrial site that was on the north side of the I&M Canal. What's next, George?
Oh, is it
There
freezing?
we go.
There you go. Sorry.
Yeah, so this plan is filled with all sorts of wonderful images. And it culminated in 2005 with an adopted downtown district plan. So you could see here, we do have Marquette and other properties. As many people know, Front Street Lofts, when I say Marquette, I'm speaking of Front Street Lofts, was envisioned to be the first of many buildings that were later slowed by the recession, but it was the start of really a redevelopment of the entire downtown, and including property along the canal uniquely. So as part of that plan, the village moved to adopt a downtown district. This is the first zoning district in quite a while, probably for the village, and the first to address specifically redevelopment in the downtown area. Um, So that DD you hear, Downtown District 2005. And following on the heels, the village also adopted a Canal Walk Master Plan, which showed some concepts for opening up the I&M Canal, again, focusing redevelopment on properties adjacent to the I&M Canal. Images like this were created. This becomes Marquette's Front Street Lofts. And more fanciful images. This is looking out into the I&M Canal, where they envisioned a canal barge and gathering center and all the rest. This was published as Post-Charette, Village of Lamont launches its downtown renaissance. So that was 05. Again, we fast forward another decade to 2015, when Lamont creates this developer discussion panel with, again, the RTA supporting the village. And you could see here, TOD, again, transit-oriented development, was the focus. 3 sites are called out: 110, 116 Main, 225, 241 Canal Street, that's the Peterson Hardware, and 400 Main Street, or Budnick Building. Again, this developer panel kind of harkens back to what was done a decade ago with the concept plan for the Lamont Station Area Plan, where it called out the Peterson site, as well as the Main Street site, 110, 116. Both of those are part of that 2004 plan. And again, as a sucker for old pictures, I want to stress that TOD, or transit-oriented development, isn't nothing. It's nothing new for the village of Lamont. I like to say we've been TOD since 1899, when the first train crosses the canal and comes into downtown Lamont. So Lamont has been a transit-oriented community for quite some time. The developer discussion panel included several short-term and long-term recommendations for the village. And for something that was adopted passed in 2015, published in 2015, I'm proud that we have been able to accomplish many, if not all of them. The first 2 are about Front Street Lofts, re-engaging them, as well as looking at gathering space or civic space in downtown Lamont. And of course, if you've seen the Front Street Lofts recently, you'll know that there's no more vacancy. All the commercial space was purchased. It was all acquired last year. And so we're really proud to have that completely occupied and to work with the property owners there to bring new business to town. And we continue to engage with the property owner of the piece to the west, which was originally going to be another building by Marquette, but the open space, which is where we enjoy a lot of events, we'll continue to engage with that property owner for downtown civic space. The next recommendation was about the downtown TIF, which was about to expire, and it asked to look at new TIF opportunities, as well as using TIF to incentivize development. Here we go. So downtown Lamont today has 3 downtown TIF districts. You could see them in the top corner. There's the Canal TIF, which is existing, and the village recently adopted the I&M TIF, which brings in properties adjacent to the I&M Canal to encourage development along the I&M. And as recommended, created a TOD TIF, or Transit Oriented Development TIF, which includes properties on Main Street as well as Illinois, again, to support mixed-use development adjacent to the metro station.
And Jason, I'll try to go through as much as I can quickly. It is bogging down a little bit, but can you see that right there? Just another key recommendation as part of the last plan would be to engage a consultant to look at a housing study for the downtown, and all that information is available on our website. And that was done in 2017. We've updated some numbers since then, but just another recommendation following the plan. And I'll kind of go through and lastly, the last recommendation, reestablish a relationship with the downtown business owners. We've done that over the last few years, working with the Downtown Merchants Association, also the Downtown Focus Group, and just trying to re-engage, and again, following our plans from 2, 4, 15, and I think this one is 2015, right, Jason? Couple other updates as we've seen these over the last couple of years. Pursue a restaurant 400 Main Street. Again, working with the property owner. That is the Budnick building, the famous Budnick building. They have they're working on the facade, as you could see. Just driving down Stevens Street, you'll see Budnick Plaza. They fixed up the apartments above, and now we're looking to work with them to bring a restaurant into that site. Still a lot of work to go, but definitely you see the transformations. And not in this picture, but obviously everyone's seen the old Amy's building. Al Swice, again, fixed up a couple apartments. So you're starting to see some changes in the downtown, and just in that investment that we're looking forward to continuing on. You'll see some of these signs have changed the last couple of weeks, I should say, with the Forge opening. But one thing we heard loud and clear from the residents, Downtown Focus Group, these plans, updating our signage. People still can't find our parking deck, and we're trying as part of that 2005 plan with Marquette, but just implementing our branding for the entire town, just trying to find ways for people to park and locate businesses and recreation. And the only thing we did recently is work at the Forge to update the sign so people can find the Forge and kind of working together in those areas. Jason, you want to?
Yeah.
Go ahead and pick it up from there.
All right.
Your PowerPoints are too loaded.
I love a good PowerPoint. Yeah. So going back, the recommendation to encourage more multifamily housing in downtown is relevant to St. James Academy, the former St. Pat's School, which was redeveloped into 9 dwelling units, although right now it's 8 dwelling units plus an office for Lotus Design and Development. And it also smacks squarely with the earlier ideas and concepts for the Peterson site. For the trustees, if it feels like we've been here before, we have. So on the Peterson's hardware site, the biggest challenge has been over the last 3 years is finding a developer who could tackle a site that's bisected in half by a storm sewer that dates back to the WPA, if I know right. That's the large storm sewer that drains into the I&M Canal. So you have a site that's bisected into east and west halves, and it's been really tricky to find somebody to tackle that. But I wanted to give a brief reminder to some of the development projects we've watched come and go over the last 3 years. So these are all committee of the whole meetings. Back in November 2017, we worked with Holiday Properties. The little inset image there is from their property in Downers Grove. They were very interested in downtown Lamont. We followed that up the following year with Capital Acquisitions and Development. Shortly after, in September 2018, we brought a plan from Intercontinental Real Estate and Development to the Committee of the Whole. And then in November 2018, we brought 2 different multifamily plans, one from South Street Development, which was 80 units, and another one from Michigan Avenue Real Estate, which would have been 36 units. And we also even looked at a concept for a hotel. Cobblestone is a hotel developer out of Wisconsin that was interested in downtown Lamont. And then finally, in June of 2019, over a year ago, we shared the Marbella project in a downtown update, including sending out the website, which a lot of people have seen. And we followed that up with a page on the village's website with some sort of question and responses that we're seeing there. So it's been a 3-year process through the Committee of the Whole to get to this point. Some of those earlier developers did have the property under contract, but it wasn't until Lotus Design and Development, Marbella, came that it was finally purchased. The last recommendation there is just simply promote the village. And we're always getting after that and promoting not only our great downtown, but the village of Lamont as a whole, and are especially excited with the Forge coming in to continue to see new visitors and even new residents coming to the village. So that brings us to where we are today. Hopefully people enjoyed a little trip down planning history lane. Again, part of this is to set the context that we've been here before, and I think it's valuable as we look at both St. James and at the proposed Marbella that we continue to keep that context in mind. So St. James, I think, goes without introduction. I walked through there today around the site. Really remarkable transformation of the old St. Pat's building. But the property that people are most curious about, of course, is the former Peterson Hardware property. So that was purchased by Lotus Design and Development, and these are some early looks at the potential redevelopment of that site. It's important to note that this is really here for discussion with trustees and to get input from the community as well. Any process would go through, any development of this or anything in downtown would first go through the Historic Preservation Commission. You would need a certificate of appropriateness. And as mentioned before, the demolition of this property did receive a certificate of appropriateness last year. And some very preliminary website images were shared at that meeting. And then following a certificate of appropriateness, a public hearing happens at the Plan Commission. The village did strengthen its downtown development codes and required a plan unit development, or a PUD. So any development of this scale in downtown Lamont would be a special use, which is a PUD. And so it would go to a Planning and Zoning Commission, to a Committee of the Whole, and ultimately has to be approved by the village board. There were a couple of artistic renderings of what the building might look like that we could get into. So you could see the sort of transformation that the developer is proposing for that, for the Peterson site. With that, George, that was the last image that I had.
All right, your 50 megabyte PowerPoint. Great job, Jason. No, I think it sets the context, and you want to go through obviously these details and dimensions, exterior, materials, the overall site plan will go through, as you mentioned, planning and zoning and also historic preservation, but maybe just an overview of what we've seen. I think a lot of these are on the developer's website as well of just the site plan, and talk about some of the challenges, you see the working around the large drainage pipe, the civic space that's being proposed. If you just want to go through that briefly, and then we'll kind of turn it over if there's any questions at this point from the board.
Sure. Yeah. So we're looking at the development on the northwest corner of Lamont and Canal Street. Obviously, it's the I&M Canal borders the north of that property. And where the parking comes in across the center is where the storm sewer is located. So that's the dividing line for development. And then obviously to the far west, you have the Lamont Road Bridge. And in the past, at Committee of the Whole, when looking with other development partners, that bridge was also a challenge. People wanted to keep their building away from the bridge, wanted to keep some space from the bridge. So this plan puts all of the commercial and residential space on the corner and provides 55 underground parking units, 56, I hope I have the numbers, but they're roughly right, 56 off-street and on-street surface parking, as well as an enhanced, sort of, they describe it as green space, but civic space that the community can use in downtown Lamont. The drawing we saw would have all commercial on the first floor. Again, to enter into the parking area, you would add to sort of the north side of Lamont Street there and come in nearer the canal to go underground if for tenants of the property. And then this structure shows a mix of 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom dwelling units and a total dwelling unit count of 67 units with amenities such as lounge, office, yoga studio, what you see in buildings these days.
Thanks, Jason. And I think you mentioned planning and zoning, historic preservation. The one thing that is fascinating about the downtown zoning ordinance from 2005, I guess, and which is recently updated, is that previously it did not require a trip to the Planning and Zoning Commission. It was essentially a master planned area. So they did all the planning for the entire downtown at one time. And over time, if the recession hadn't hit us in 08, 09, perhaps this whole area would have been developed already, but it did not require the planning and zoning step as part of the process. So we wanted to put that back in, and just about any development on this site will require a PUD now. So that's a good opportunity to take it back through the process. Again, a lot of those details can get worked out, but I don't know if we need, we do have the developer on here, or maybe let's turn it over to the board first and see if they have any questions, and then I can give it back to Dominic or somebody on the developer group. But Rick Snagowski raised his hand. Let me make sure I can. There you go. You go ahead, Rick. I think you're.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful with the crowd we have here tonight, 46 people, bigger than most. I think it'd be helpful to define a couple of these renderings and put them in perspective as they lay on that plan from what is my understanding from seeing this. For starters, this structure in the top left, where you see Lamont Street, obviously that structure is crossing Lamont Street. So that would be the south east corner that you're seeing there of the building.
Be over here.
And
yeah.
that would be right up on the bottom right of the building as shown on this drawing. So it's crossing Lamont Street right there. The picture on the top right is facing west.
Correct.
As is the one on the bottom left. And the one on the bottom right is facing east. And if we go back to that drawing one more time.
It's getting there.
And I see that, George. I'm just trying to give a perspective there from the curb line. Right now, where we have the on Lamont Street, it'd be kitty corner to the vault. We have some of those inlaid parking places. That would be the east side of the building. And from there, George, I can't quite read that, but I'm trying to get a dimension there of the width of the building from that corner going west. Just by parking stalls alone, it looks to be about, I don't know, somewhere between 60 and 90 feet wide.
Correct.
So the building from the east face going to the west would be about 90 feet. And that would give you a perspective of the footprint on the entire lot from the curb line of Lamont Street on the west all the way to the bridge. Also, what I liked when I first saw this was the amount of outdoor parking that it brings to the downtown area in this proposed drawing. There's quite a bit of parking along Canal Street. And then also the parking on the, that'll be the north side and then along the west face of the building. And then along with the underground parking that is proposed. So there's quite a bit of parking there, all on both sides of Canal Street, actually. So those were some things that interest me in this first draft proposal. So thanks, George.
Rick, don't
Yeah.
forget that, don't forget the 250 spaces in the public garage. I was there today. 10 of them were
Right.
being used.
Well, that's absolutely right. But I'm just saying, John, this brings us a lot more, in
Yeah.
total, a lot more parking downtown, which has been something we continuously hear about. We need more parking. We need more parking. And here's a proposal bringing to the table, at least in this draft, quite a bit of parking to be added to that.
Yeah, and it's been a challenge. As Jason mentioned, working with 7 or 8 different developers. It's a tough site, the pipe, but you know, you have property on both sides of Canal Street. I think one of the recommendations in a plan from the early 90s or 2000s was to vacate Canal Street, but you know, you have all sorts of utilities in there, and so that became a little bit problematic. But we've had a couple developers wanted to just in discussions just put, you know, propose to move the pipe, but then you're talking about, I mean, 60% of the village's water comes down that pipe. I don't know if we want to be messing with it. And if we did, it'd be quite a capital project to move the pipe. And others that wanted to cover both sides of the property with buildings. I think this is a nice, it's a nice addition to the town. We don't have we have Budnick Plaza but property that could be owned publicly or to have some type of community use. I think it's never a bad thing to have property and probably more civic space than park. It won't be programmed necessarily, probably, but yeah, just some challenges with the site but no, I think kind of turn it along. But
George, I think
Yep.
one last comment I had to make. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't. That would cover everything that was on my mind. If you go back to the actual rendering of the outside of the building, there we go, that one. I also think it's important to point out that the overall height of this structure is in the same height as the current building, the Front Street facility. So, and it is to the far east side of that parcel. So that's my understanding anyway. So you guys can correct me where I'm wrong with what I delivered here. So thanks.
any other trustee on the site layout or design of the buildings? We do have to kind of move it along. I know we have some residents who want to speak, but we also want to get into just the overall TIF discussion before this moves on to the next level of land use planning. But anything else at this point other than so we can get into TIF?
George, I
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
resolved the issue about the reserve strip.
Yeah, unfortunately, COVID hit us at a bad time. We have, I think if you go back to the site plan, the intent all along was to sell property, as little property as possible. And if you look at this, pink shaded area, pink purple shaded area, that area is on village property, where some type of swap or sale would be required. We've had title companies agree to write over any type of reverter clause from the 1960s, but we were trying to get that into legislation as a cleanup item. It was ready to go in the spring, but then the legislature obviously took some time off for COVID, and we're hopeful to get that back up there just to button it up once and for all. But we think now, obviously these projects don't get built overnight, as we all know. I mean, even after a process, you're talking phasing of engineering. You're talking multiple, probably final PUD. I mean, there's a long way to go where we can get that done, Ron.
George, I have a suggestion. When we took over the canal, there were 60 leases along the reserve strip that we had, and eventually people dropped off. Could we lease this again? I mean, as far as I know, there'd be no problem leasing it for 99 years at $10 a year. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's potential. I think what we're trying to say, regardless of the intent of the land transfer in 1969 to the village, but you're going back several decades. But the intent is we're returning more open space that could be utilizing the canal than we ever had before. And if you look at the whole area here, turning this into, so it's just more of a configuration of the building issue. You could put multiple buildings over here, but again, just adds to the challenge of the site.
Okay.
All right. Hey, Jason, you want to go on to the next part? Unless I saw a hand. No, I think-
Hey, George.
Go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, I put my hand up, so I was just kind of waiting. Is the intent of this discussion to provide feedback on these renderings and these drawings, or is it just to have the TIF discussion?
It's both. I think the developers asked us for feedback on both so that they can continue to plan for the next step. This is pre-application. So, I mean, I think that any comment from the board is pertinent, where he could include potentially into his next round of revisions. So I think it's both, Dave. But again, it's a long way to go. But yeah, if you have anything now, I think.
Okay, I'll ask that. But when's the next time they would present for us? Will they present? Would it be their preliminary PUD, or is there going to be a step before that?
Before the board?
Yes.
It would be. I'm not going to speak for the developer. I think they'd like to at least move it through to tech review. Just so we can get some of the technical issues resolved, and then put it through the process. You run the risk, you have too many meetings before a process. And so, yeah, I think if comments can't be addressed here tonight, we can have further discussions, but I think that's their intent.
Okay. So I'm just trying to confirm Rick's comment. There was a question I had when I did a review with him on height and how it compares to the loft. So did we get a confirmation that of the elevation differences between this and the lofts?
Well, according to the plans of this project, this is looking at 59 feet. The lofts is taller than that, but the grades are differently. So it comes down to a question of where are you measuring your grade, your height from, I guess, because
so I'm measuring it from the top of the building. So if I'm on a bridge and I'm looking at the top of the lofts and I go look at the top of this, which one's taller?
they'll be around the same. And that's probably one of those, details that if it's between a foot or, foot one way or the other, that'll be kind of flushed out at the next step.
Okay. And but is the goal to stay to try to be at least the lofts or lower? Is that their goal, or have they set a goal, or we've not asked them for a goal?
Jason, have you talked to Rob or anybody about that, or?
George, this is Rob.
Yeah.
Hey, George. I mean, we did our first cut at the elevation, and we're hoping that this meeting plus future discussions start to hone in on the height and any other issues that the board might have in regards to the height. So we know
Okay,
that
so,
concern. We believe that both buildings are relatively the same height. Obviously, the elevation is different. We are taller going up the hill. And then we also did some preliminary studies in regards to the steeples and whether any of the perspective from the bridge or anywhere else would clip any of the steeples. And everything was relative to the position that you're looking at. So we've had lots of discussions in regards to the height relative to the skyline of Lamont.
okay, so just from my feedback, I would like to see this at no higher than the lofts. So if you're looking for feedback, that's the feedback I'm giving.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely what we're looking for.
Yeah, to Dave's point, I did some did some research on the height. I think the lofts have a steeple that's 665 feet above sea level. This is just all based on Google Earth, obviously, so it's not real science. You're at 656 feet and 8 inches above sea level, and the lofts are 665. The lofts are above sea level. The very top, the highest point, and the highest point, based on what you submitted, it looks like it's 656 feet 8 inches. So the rooftop of the elevator shaft is, I think it's 5 feet below that. So
Approximately the same then,
approximately the same.
minus 10 feet maybe.
Great. And the parking garage underneath, we don't see that as a problem. And how many stalls were we looking at under there again?
I think we had 50 something. I can't see it on the screen. There's 50 something below, and then there's approximately 86 outside.
Okay. How many units are you looking to put in here?
The current proposal is approximately 68. There's quite a bit of common space. So the floor plan as shown on the website is I think 68. One
And
bedroom,
will,
2
so-
bedrooms, and 1 bedroom dens.
okay. And do you expect them all to be rentals?
Yes.
Okay. How many, I believe you said there was a fitness center then in for this as well?
Yeah, it's the fitness center is approximately 2,000 square feet.
Okay. So it, when I went through with this with you, what you're really looking to do, as far as I can tell, is make more of a luxury apartment complex here. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, the term luxury is relative. We studied the surrounding areas, LaGrange, and so forth, Downers Grove, and we said, okay, what exactly are people looking for, and who are we competing against? So that's where we came up with this design relative to Lombard, LaGrange, Downers Grove, and so forth. So, I mean, I guess, some people don't like to use the term luxury, but they are going to be luxury apartments.
Okay. And then my last question was with the green space that you're leaving there. George kind of mentioned it a little bit, but could I know, I'm sure you've kind of heard the make it lower, spread it out. And what was your thought behind having more green space, park and then maybe asking to go a little higher on the building?
What do you mean make it lower, spread it out?
Well, like one other option you could do here to get the same amount of spaces is create another building where your green space is, right? And put another, for a 3-story building there, right? And so you've made a decision to have green space and go a little bit higher on a building structure.
Right. Okay, I
Right.
see what you're saying. Yeah, the preliminary or the previous developer concepts had no green space, and what they did is they just spread out, I think, 3-story Jason, you can correct me, I think there were 3-story buildings, and then they occupied the entire site. We had said, it's all a geometry, or, it's all a case of what do you want to put under the building versus outside the building, and how much green space. So yes, this was the optimum for green space at around 3/4 of an acre, I think it is, public and apartment parking, as well as underground parking.
Okay, and then from the underground, sorry, I asked this, but the underground parking, do you see an issue? I believe there's probably some stone you're gonna have to get rid of to be able to go underground.
Yeah, you pretty much have to go to bedrock, I think is what Sale had said on his preliminary review of it. So it will be challenging, quite challenging, and probably costly to put in that underground parking.
Okay. All right, thanks for answering my questions. I
You're welcome.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. And trustee Kwasniewski had a question, then I'll go to trustee Kittredge. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I just had a real quick question. We obviously covered a couple of the general questions that a lot of people have on their mind, but looking at the parking on the streets, both on the going up towards the town and obviously by the canal, those are going to be public as well as for the building, or are they going to be just for the people who live in the building?
Right now, everything is slated as public, which would include somebody in the building would be able to use it. So we looked at both the along the south side of Canal and said, let's maximize. So there's a continuation of the Metro parking, which is those, I don't know if there are 12 spots right there that go perpendicular to the street. And then there's this diagonal parking there. That's basically a continuation of the east side of Lamont Street, which is next, I think, is it the Volta restaurant. So we didn't slate it as, it's definitely not building resident only. It's for both. And then we had conversations in regards to the Metro parking on weekends and after hours also being available for public as well as resident parking there.
Perfect.
So right now the 86 is what we, I mean, 86 would be surrounding the building as well as along the canal, as well as along Canal Street. We just maximized parking spots and haven't had any additional conversations from there. But there's plenty to cover the residents.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Trustee Kittredge.
Yeah, hey Rob, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got
Yeah.
you.
Hey, Jennifer.
Okay, I just wanted to just make sure I add to, I know we talked about it previously as well, but on the north side of that building, I just want to make sure that we do emphasize that as we don't really want to have a backside, that we want to make sure that on the front street side that they can see that building and it doesn't look like the back. That's all. I just wanted to add that we make sure that that does get given more of a design where it looks like.
Landscaped and yeah, there's going to probably be a retaining wall there because the elevation does dip down
Sure.
quite a bit towards Canal. And then there's this proposed walkway to give continuity between Statton's building to the Metro. So I think you looked at, I think it's that charcoal color right there.
And that was all I wanted to add, just to make sure that that gets done.
All right, any, Ryan, was that your hand from before? Or do you have another question?
I just had one other quick thing. I know when we met, Rob, I really liked how you kind of described the look and feel and how you came up with the design of it. If you can just kind of touch that, so that way the people who are on the meeting and watching on YouTube and Channel 6 as well can kind of understand where you took a lot of the ideas that you got for the design.
Sure. So the inspiration was really from the Haussmann style architecture that was popular in the 1800s in Paris. And it kind of optimizes the roof line for both, weather conditions like snow loads and so forth. But it also allowed the developers in the 1800s to use the upper floor as residential living. So that's a really popular style in Europe. And having traveled quite a bit to Europe, I really like the optimization of space and just the overall geometry on the heights and width of windows, as well as the mansard style roof lines. So, as Jason had said, Lamont came to its heydays in the late 1800s, turn of the century. We thought that was more appropriate than some of these contemporary rectangular looking buildings that are just glass and applied panels that you see in a lot of these other downtown areas. So this is also a design that's pretty prevalent in the downtown Chicago area also.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the design from the board and any other items to get in? Then I'll turn it back over to Jason. No. Jason, you want to take it to the next step and just start talking about development costs and kind of some input that the developer and staff needs from the board on sending this to the next level to start looking at land use. You want to go ahead?
Sure. Lotus Design Development, Rob Abenanti, who we just heard from, already has a presence, obviously, in downtown Lamont with St. James Academy. As part of St. James Academy's construction, they developed a parking lot for the benefit of residents, the public, parishioners at St. Pat's, as well as some additional parking for the Lamont Area Historical Society, of which I am a life member, and all of you should be too. And the development costs there, because of, again, the retaining wall, the cost of the limestone on the retaining wall and et cetera, we're over $600,000. These costs are TIF eligible. And so the developer has requested that they be considered as part of a TIF request, along with a TIF incentive for proposed Marbella. Speaking with Rob and the development team, I think want to know that the village can support the project financially before going forward. I think that's important to show, at least tonight, that there is an intent from the village board to engage the village attorney and anyone else that maybe need to be part of that process to work on a redevelopment agreement for the TOD and I&M TIF districts. Last I looked at this project, and the Lotus team could correct me if I'm wrong, it was for Marbella, we're looking at over $26 million investment in downtown Lamont. Again, the significant costs of underground parking, you saw in the elevations, real materials, stone, brick, the cost of parking and all, et cetera, as well as improving the streetscape along Canal and Lamont Street. You heard Rob talk about connecting this property actively to other parts of downtown Lamont, make it a part of downtown Lamont. And so a $26 million building doesn't happen often without local support. And again, the property here is in the new I&M TIF because of its adjacency to the I&M Canal. And the way a TIF incentive would work is the property taxes are now capped or set at a base rate. So what the property is paying now, last I checked, was $75,000, say, in property taxes. Obviously, a $26 million investment is going to significantly raise property taxes, particularly in Cook County. So there's, again, the commercial units and the number of residential units will all impact the amount of property taxes that this development generates. And what the village has been asked to consider is what's called a pay-as-you-go incentive. So that means there's no upfront costs to the village. The developer pays for the construction, but there's an agreement between the village and the developer that all or a portion of the incremental property taxes gets rebated back to the developer. Pay-as-you-go is you know, a fair process and fairly typical process for municipal development. George, as you and I talked before, Marquette, the last big development, actually had the village issue debt or bonds for construction. And so, you know, there hasn't been any talk from this developer, from Lotus for that, just a request for a pay-as-you-go incentive.
So can we ask questions? We got quiet there.
Yeah, Jason, are you done?
So
I
he's-
am.
Okay, yeah.
He's kind of bogging down a little, but yeah, if you want to go ahead, Dave.
Ask George, my first floor internet here at Village Hall isn't as strong, I guess.
John, I mean, I'll let John, I'll defer to John if you have questions.
No,
John.
no, go, well, real quick. So just so I understand, so right now the, you know, not to get bogged down in the numbers, but what we're trying to understand here is, are we willing to move forward with the concept of basically rebating the real estate taxes back, correct? I mean, right now, Jason, you mentioned a $75,000 real estate tax bill that Lotus is paying today. They're going to invest $26 million. That 75,000 is going to go up. And for the sake of just round numbers, let's say it's 375 per year. That's coming out of their pocket, correct? So what we're contemplating is their tax bill goes from 75 to 375 with the $26 million investment. How much of that 375, that's what we're here talking about, correct? Of basically the increment of 300,000. So, you know, and my question is with giving that, you know, money rebated back, for lack of a better term, what would we be getting back as a village? What is kind of that trade-off? I mean, obviously we're getting a $26 million investment in town. Can you or Rob, can you talk about it a little bit? You mentioned streetscape. Anything else to add on what the TIF money will be used for? Because again, it has to be used within the TIF district, correct, Jason?
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, so John, we had that listed somewhere, but in a previous presentation, but I could just go over it in general. Primarily having to do with the infrastructure costs of putting in the streets, the curbs, street lights, sidewalks, landscaping, the park, and so forth. And I believe we haven't gotten the quote back on the gateway that where you see Lamont Street on the upper left. That was a request to have somewhat of a gateway into the downtown Lamont area from the west side. So we had proposed this structure that was reminiscent of some of the old bridges, as well as a little wing to the Eiffel Tower and the geometry of that structure. So basically everything that supports the development of the building in that area.
Got it.
And I don't have that presentation in front of me, but we had listed down a bunch of stuff, but that's pretty much the gist of it.
Okay. And Jason, what has been our kind of, you know, we obviously have policies about, or at least we've adopted a policy within the last 2 or 3 years as far as incentives. Like for instance, Pete's Fresh. Pete's Fresh does not come into town unless we offered them an incentive. They heard it loud and clear. And you want to just kind of walk through the math as far as why we give out incentives like this, or why we even, contemplate an incentive like this?
Sure. Yeah, as you mentioned, Pete's Fresh, that was one where we worked with them on a sales tax incentive. So the village shares the sales tax that we receive from Pete's with them up to a cap. So generally, the accepted principle is a village would participate in the project up to 20% of the total cost. These are, so at a $26 million building, the cap would be 20% of that. And this pay-as-you-go would work quite similar to a sales tax incentive, like with Pete's, where the village receives revenue, like we would sales tax. We receive the property tax revenue from Cook County Treasurer, and then pursuant to a redevelopment agreement, would rebate that money again back to the developer, depending on the amount of increment that is being generated. As you said, we think projections showed anywhere from $250,000 to $350,000 in new property tax revenue annually on a property of this, or development of this scale.
Got it. So in today's money, it's 20% of 26 million is I think it's 5.2 million. So that would be potentially the incentive. Again, the village, we're not coming out of pocket, 1 penny on this. This is TIF money, but that would be, we're not bonding this, correct? We're not taking any debt out on this. This would be, when you say pay as you go, it's basically rebating the taxes back that Lotus Development is paying, correct? And just so I'm 100% sure, I think we talked about this last time. If there is any school age children in this, that is not rebated back, or that's at the discretion of the schools, correct?
Right, yeah, we talk about available incentive because under, state statute, Illinois law, if there are any school age children living in this property, the schools as well as the library would contact the village, and we would pay them their share. So any incentive would likely look at the amount of available taxes, and that would be the amount of available increment after the set aside for school and library.
And my last question is on the St. James parking lot, that parking lot is available to the public in some shape or form, is that correct?
Yes, John.
Okay.
In addition to the parking lot, the retaining wall, the landscaping and so forth, you guys missed the alley. So we also redid the alley, as well as, which I think Jason mentioned, the Historical Society parking lot too. So the alley you guys had missed that we actually redid.
Yeah, the alley was repaved from Lamont Street right up until the St. Pat's Parish.
Okay. That's all I got. Dave, go ahead, buddy.
Trustee Snagowski had one. I don't know, has he gotten in yet, or I'll lower his hand here? Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I just would like to, I want to make sure I understand one point here, John. I think it's kind of what you're talking about, and I want to just make sure it's clear. As long as the developer is including all of our public works type cost, in other words, the streetscaping, the parking, these things that we're talking about right now, then that's what makes available this net increment rebate. The other way would be for the developer not to include those public works costs, in which case we would collect the taxes, but then we would have to do those improvements to get to the same place. So it's a matter of the developer coming forward and presenting a full package, including village cost in a roundabout way, or for the developer to pay the taxes and then for us to spend those dollars on the same public works, but in a separate package, which typically becomes uncoordinated and doesn't bring the presence that it would to be a completed job for a grand opening where everything is done. I guess that's my best attempt to explain my understanding of the differences.
Got it. And I said one last question, but just Jason, as a point of reference, $5.2 million would be their available cap, sticking to our policy. What is the, because we had obviously consultants look at this, TIF consultants, what is the projected in today's dollars, not gross dollars, because a dollar today is worth more than a dollar tomorrow. What is the net present value of the projected increment that's available for the next 23 years?
Yeah, Mayor, it's approximately $3 million.
Okay. Got it. I'm good.
All right, anybody else on the board have any questions or?
So when we talk about this TIF and vote on this TIF, are we voting on two separate TIFs? Are we voting? How is that going? I know we're not voting today, but these are two different developments at least, right? So this and the St. James, are we talking about those separately or together? I'm just confused on what our process is here right now.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I think part of this discussion is to get direction there, because two different projects, but the same developer. So it could be addressed in one redevelopment agreement between the Village of Lamont and Lotus Design and Development, or it could be split up between St. James and Marbella, potential Marbella.
Okay. I thought, Jason, I heard you say you're also looking for feedback. So I think they're looking for us to tell them our opinion on this, right?
Oh, please, yes.
So from my perspective, I consider these two properties separate. So I would like these to come in separately. I support this development, but I don't support a TIF for the parking lot. The parking lot is alley access. That parking lot is typically in the weekends is over 50% full. There's not a lot of spaces in there. And it's alley access and church access to get there. I don't feel that we want to actually be directing and put signs up from a safety perspective to access that parking lot. So I don't support a TIF in that area, but I do definitely support this TIF for this redevelopment. I think this, if we stay underneath the loft height, I think this is a good development for the village.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave, for your input. If any of the other trustees are, against it, pursuing either one of the TIFs, feel free to voice your opinion.
I'm kind of with Dave on it should be separate. And it shouldn't be public parking either. I think it just should be where we originally were at, where it's for overflow of the church, personally.
And Jason, I know that because of COVID, we had a grant lined up with CMAP, and I think they've lost staff, and to do a civic space and parking study, I don't think it's going to happen anymore. I would caution you guys. The parking south of Illinois Street is a problem, and we've talked about it in the past. We have residents who we don't really, they're parking in the Village Hall parking lot, they're parking in other they're parking on the street because they have nowhere else to park. I think we have to start securing parking and property for parking. And yeah, this seems small, but I'll just put that out there. I think we need to, this is what we need to do. We need to start securing property and parking to help out the folks on Illinois Street and everything south of just because they're not businesses, they are our residents, and we got to find places for them to park. That's my 2 cents.
Hey, George,
Yeah.
this is Rob. I know we had discussed this before, and I think we made a presentation at the last meeting in regards to TIF. I mean, we really never covered what exactly is Illinois' definition of TIF and what are the incentives to a developer in a TIF area. I mean, you guys are focusing on parking, and I appreciate it. But I mean, when you look at that site, that was a historical building that was slated to be torn down. And then we rescued it. And not only that, but we also repurposed all the interior items, donated them to charity, spent, I think at that, for just Blue Earth, it was an additional $80,000 to repurpose versus filling up a land site, sorry. But, we went through and studied thoroughly Illinois' definition of TIF. So it wasn't just a matter of, oh, here's some parking spots that additional people can use. It was really, I mean, we checked all the boxes for what Illinois considers TIF eligible. And, a big part of that has to do with really restoring a building to its original glory and still having it as a historical landmark within the downtown area. For me, I always viewed the building, its structure, and the beauty that surrounds it a lot more than just a parking lot, because that's what the original incentive was, to tear down that building and to put a parking lot there. So for when I first looked at the building, it was really more of saving the building and what it was going to cost financially to do that. And that's where we started looking at everything. I mean, the original design had a very simple staircase going to the front. We elected to make it a little bit more of a wedding cake design and landscape it and so forth, because it was one of the first buildings you saw coming off of Lamont Road. So I know you guys mentioned a few times the parking lot, but to me, the value has to do with the fact that the building stands there now repurposed, and it's an asset to the town.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if you look at what TIF is for and why developers look at TIF, there's a bunch of stuff that's encompassing, and including infrastructure. And the parking lot also has a massive water retention area underneath it too, in order to still maintain the integrity of the site and still meet all the village codes and so forth. But I believe that the fact that that building, maybe 80% of the people may not care about the parking. If you go to church there, you might use it. But I believe that everybody that drives through the downtown area sees the beauty of that building, and the fact that it's been repurposed. And that's what we're seeing working with the Archdiocese on other properties. That seems to be the big push now is, they're losing funding on churches, they're losing funding on schools, and they're looking for developers to not tear down historical structures or even schools that are useful, but they're looking for repurposing, and TIF falls into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Hey, Rob, real quick, since we're on that, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. So we talked about the parking lot, 600, 700,000. What was your total investment just into the building piece?
The whole project was 2.2 million, which was way over what we originally intended. And that was just because we wanted it to be, the quality that the building deserved. Like on the inside, we didn't drywall any of the walls. We did a lot of studies in regards to the optimum way of finishing this type of building. And we spent a lot of money leaving exposed stone on the interior, retuck pointing not only the exterior, but the interior. So all of those costs went up considerably just to maintain historical integrity. And then if you look at that, I don't know what the name of that school was, that's up on the hill, the large building, they actually did drywall the interior. And in doing that, they're getting a lot of issues with the stone not being able to breathe and deteriorating on the inside. So a lot of, hidden costs that went into the building, but the overall cost was 2.2 million.
Got it.
Rick, you had your hand up, trustee Sneelson.
Yes, I'm going to put it out there that generally my concern is making sure that developers do what they say they're going to do. In this particular case, I want to say that in good faith, this guy went ahead and did things he didn't have to do. And he's coming back to us and asking us to help him out here a little bit with a defined process that we can do. So my feelings are that when we find a builder who goes above and beyond what we expect, and that we don't have to go chase them down to make sure they do what they say they're going to do, that's worth something to me. I think, and I'm making that statement as I believe that's something worth it to the village. This particular parking lot structurally is right up against the street. We've had problems along the street with other private property items, such as retaining walls that have failed over time. So doing a good job in supporting that parking lot above the road is certainly something that we also need to consider. What will we do in the future had that parking lot caved in on the road? Now it becomes a right-of-way issue along with the private property issue. So there's a lot to the story here that I think goes untold. I've only talked to Rob on the phone. I've really never met him. I'm just talking about in general, when people do a good job, they should be recognized. And I think he did an excellent job in that process. And we didn't have to go chase him to get him to do that. So that's my 2 cents.
Ken had his hand up, trustee McClafferty, sorry.
Yeah, I was just to Rick's point, if any property should be eligible for TIF money, it should be St. James's. What they've done there was unbelievable. Like what Rick said, they went above and beyond what I expect them to do. And I think that property should be, along with the Marabella property, should be I'd parcel them together. It'd be an easier process, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ken. Anybody else from the board?
Yeah, I want to clarify something. What are they asking for the TIF for on the St. James property? I thought the TIF was being asked for the parking lot.
The TIF is for the entire project. So, and sorry, Dave, but the last presentation had all of the infrastructure, all the costs that was TIF eligible. So we start out with first understanding what TIF is, how Illinois defines TIF, and what boxes we check in that eligibility. So I don't know why the conversation kept going to the parking lot. The parking lot was the part that would be considered, okay, that could be used publicly. But the entire project and the infrastructure for the project and the restoration of the facade and so forth, all of those are defined under the Illinois TIF Act, I think is what they call it. I had the link in my other presentation for what would be considered TIF eligible.
Yeah, and I think from a board perspective, we go through that when we set up those TIF districts. Rob, was there any thought of asking for TIF money before you started this project?
Dave, we've had, this was, I was new to development in a TIF area, and from the very beginning, we had spoke about TIF and various other incentives about putting in, supporting infrastructure costs and so forth. So we've had lengthy conversations, but we weren't experienced, and I didn't know how experienced you guys were on providing guidelines on, hey, before you do anything, put in an application and fill out these boxes. So in hindsight, we probably should have held off on the project. And that's what we're doing here, lessons learned with Marbella is we went ahead because there was pressure on, I think we left the building vacant for maybe 2 years or so. And then we were getting pressure to do something. And, I didn't know, I didn't have any type of document that said this is what you need to do to get TIF money. I just went on the Illinois website and we kind of look at TIF eligibility. We talked to attorneys that specialized in it, and that was about it.
Okay.
So
And then-
in
and since-
hindsight, yes, we should have not done anything until we had these discussions, which is what we are doing on Marbella.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
so, and I'm assuming then you talked to our staff as well, right?
Yeah, we've talked to
Yeah.
plenty of people there.
And then, from our staff perspective, was this property included in the new TIF that we had?
No, this is, this property still is in the TOD TIF.
Okay,
The INM TIF, essentially Main Street or the BNSF tracks is the southern boundary of that TIF.
so how many years are left in this TIF?
23, well, 22, I'm sorry.
And how long was the TIF originally?
Their TIFs are for 23 years. This TIF is only a year old.
So this is the new TIF, this is a new TIF.
No, we
It's
just
very
approved
good.
one. It was the one
Yeah,
from a year
this
ago.
was, the TOD TIF was approved in 2018. So we'll get increment in 2019. The TIFs are always kind of a year behind because you're paying property taxes. So while TIFs have 23 years of life, you see the last payment 24 years in the future. So
Right. Okay, so let me ask the question differently. When we were restoring this project, it was in an older TIF, correct?
no, the downtown TIF expired, I believe, in 2014. So when we created the TOD TIF, the only TIF in downtown Lamont was the canal TIF.
Okay, was this property included in the canal TIF?
No, it was in the
Okay.
down.
Okay, so this property was put into a TIF before or after they started construction?
This TIF started in 2018. So before August 2018, so before construction.
I still think this needs to be separate. I'd like to see the expenses they talked about. It would be great if you could send that out to us. So I can kind of relate to what he's talking about, but I'd still.
Dave, I don't know if anybody disagrees about the TIFs being separate in regards to consideration. And we're not looking to link the two in regards to if you don't give us that, we're not doing this type of thing.
Mhm.
So I don't know, Jason, if you want to clarify that. We're having the same discussion because it's the same developer.
Yeah, we could put it in two separate documents if that helps, but I mean, I think as Ken mentioned, for simplicity, put it all together, but it could be two separate documents. That's fine.
Okay, and then
Yeah,
if you
I-
could send the expenses, that'd be great.
Yeah, I agree with Dave. If we could just see the total investment, not only the parking lot, but the parking lot and the building, I think you said it was 2.2 million. Was that just for the building or is it?
The whole
2.
project, the whole project.
Okay, yeah.
2.2 million.
Yeah, so if we could look at that, because again, I think it's more than the parking lot, at least from my perspective. So yeah, Jason, you want to just work with their team on that?
Yeah, and to be clear, everybody will see costs. These are, public dollars. The money being spent needs to be what they call TIF eligible, as Rob mentioned several times. And we'll engage the village attorney and others to verify that, those costs are legit and eligible. And the actual dollars being spent by the developer and then reimbursed by the village is all a very public process.
Yeah, I think the thing that I struggle with a little bit though, Jason, when you say that, and Rob, I get your learning. I struggle. I'm among other things struggling with this being an after the fact thing, right? We didn't have there wasn't a communication on this. This wasn't a project that came to the village board at all. And right from the beginning, it's two separate projects. And now we're in a situation, and I love how the building looks. I've been in the building and you guys did a great job. I really appreciate the work he did, and we're in a situation now where we're in after effect, and we're saying we're having a discussion on this, and that's another thing that I'm struggling with a little bit as well. So, but I think then there has to be clarification, George, because I feel like what we were saying is Rob's saying he wants us to consider everything, which I understand that makes a little more sense to me. But we've talked about this as a parking lot, and we're going to do the TIF for the parking lot and make the parking lot a public parking lot and do some things. So I feel like there's a little confusion as well, at least on
Yeah.
my side, because I'm misunderstanding that.
That's more of the tangible. I think anyone in the area, what I'm looking at now, and certainly Rob, I don't want to shortchange the building. It's awesome. We've met a couple of residents who live in there. I mean, I think you go back in time, the village, staff or board or pretty much, begged 2 or 3 developers to walk through there. We were about to enter into uncharted territories with lawsuits with the Catholic Church, which we have good attorneys, but we would have lost. And I think there was a lot of good faith in trying to get somebody in there. And the other thing, maybe it'll crystallize a little bit for you later on, Dave. We have a couple big projects, Walker Road, the Army Corps, water main project out at Walker Road, where we don't have a TIF out there yet, but those costs will all be TIF eligible if and when there is a TIF. So I think the timing, you'll see it a little bit later. It all works. It's all associated with the TIF, and the timing maybe is confusing, but for me, getting the parking lot is important. I field the calls. I know Jason does too, when they get tickets from our police department, and I have to argue with the police chief and say, well, what are we going to do here? We have to find parking for these residents here. There are residents, and we can't just say you can't park anywhere. So that's kind of where I'm looking at it from my stand of helping out residents. And I think that's the tangible thing for me right now is the parking lot, but I don't want to shortchange the building. It's an awesome project.
And Dave, I mean, I think from my point of view, we don't know of an application process for TIF. We've checked online. It's really not a defined process. So it's difficult to figure out what you do. And that's why we've been kind of pushing the conversation. And I brought it up at the last public presentation is, okay, guys, we'd like to discuss TIF. This is what we have into it. This is what we're asking for. This is why. But there's really not a fill out this application online, send it in, and then we'll review it. So I don't know if it's just us new to it or you guys are also new to it, but we don't know of a formal process or an application for TIF.
But and Rob, it doesn't seem like this TIF was even there when you bought the property. So, right. So if you would have looked into it back then, there wasn't there because this is 18. I think you owned the property before August of 2018. So.
Yeah,
right,
we were new to it. So
I'm just saying that the TIF wasn't even around when you bought the property. So even if you looked, you wouldn't have been there.
And that's a good point. It's still eligible though. I think we'll talk, we'll get some costs out to the board and and we'll go from there, but we do have to move things along.
Okay.
Yeah, do any of I agree with George. We need to open it up to the public. Any other trustees have any issues with moving forward with this outside of separating the two?
None for me.
All right. Rather than have everybody wait to the very end and it's already getting late, if anybody has any comments, again, we're going to go out of order and allow you to talk now. I'll put your hand up and I'll call on you and unmute you, but please keep to, the 3-minute rule that we have at the end of the meeting. I'm just trying to do this so people don't have to stay here till 10 o'clock other than me, Jason, and the board here. So yeah, if anybody has any hands up, I do have a couple that I could read into the record, but I'll kind of leave it up. So I think the only one that has their hand up now is Kathy Henderson. I'll unmute you. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hello. Good evening. Thanks for letting me speak tonight. I do want to echo everyone else as far as the quality of the project so far that Rob has brought to Lamont. excellent. I've taken a look at them myself, and I think the project that he's proposing tonight is, or he's not proposing it, but he's actually showing us more of the details tonight. And looks like a good plan. The one thing that I have had a concern about from the very beginning, I've had some emails and some discussions with Rob personally about the height. And the plan obviously hasn't changed. He's looking at, the 5 stories, which is a problem. We've worked really hard to keep billboards off the bridge and keep that view that we all love of the downtown area. And I still feel that this is going to definitely be a problem as far as, changing that view, us enjoying the downtown historic feel that we have right now on Canal Street. I'm just concerned, I'm wondering why we are not following our downtown ordinances. We do have that area is our Main Street area of our downtown ordinances, and it does clearly call for that block to remain historic. It has some of our oldest buildings, and so I'm wondering, it seems like the entire board has confirmed tonight that they're okay with the height of, 5 stories, as long as it doesn't go over the loft. The loft is in a different part of this zoning ordinance district. To my understanding, the lofts is a 5-story street, where Main Street and Lamont Street and Canal Street area, that is restricted to 3 stories. So I just don't understand, why it sounds like other developers have come in and proposed different types of developments with not as many units. And this developer, for whatever reason, believes that 5 stories is appropriate on that corner. And any way you design it, it's going to stick up like a skyscraper as far as I'm concerned. And I know they've done elevations and studies, and they're going to be showing a lot of that at the meetings, but this is still a big concern for a lot of people. This gateway, I do not think it works there's nothing historic about it. It's an eyesore, in my opinion. I love the Eiffel Tower, but I do not want to see that on the parking lot there by the vault on the other side of the railroad tracks. We don't need, at first it was, something that I thought was going to be historic, but this completely takes away from any kind of historic vibe we might have had. So very disappointed in that. It's, as far as the train, I know he said he did studies, the train schedule, from what we've understood, is not changing. They're not going to be adding any more train lines here into Lamont. So if that's the case, I do feel it's going to be difficult to rent these apartments. My daughters have both been looking, and the prices for LaGrange and Downers Grove are higher because they have a good train service. And I think it's going to be difficult for him to rent this many units. And I'm kind of known as the open space lady in town, so I appreciate the green space and the open space, but I'm just wondering if they've considered any other designs other than just this one that we've seen, because there are ways they could have went over that height and that line, where maybe they just did a walkway or something else, so they spread it out a little bit. So I'm not in favor of the 5 stories. I have to be vocal about that, and I just don't understand, how the entire board is looking away from, our ordinances and not following them. I feel like it's definitely going to take away from our
Kathy?
historic character.
Hey, Kathy. Yeah, sorry, you're bumping up over 4 minutes. And I think,
Okay.
and we could come back to you if we have time, but the one thing, and I'll give it to the next resident, that we hear a lot with development, and I'll just address it, is that, developments don't meet code. I'm just not sure that's completely accurate. The code contemplates and even requires it in this instance of a PUD, which a PUD allows for the flexibility the standards in the code. So I just don't think that's completely accurate. But your point is taken, and that's why we have a process. It'll go through the process, and public hearing, you'll have more than 3 minutes, but that's just one thing I'll say about the code. So, but thank you, Kathy. And next is Matt Giblin.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say a few quick rapid fire things, and then I do have the main question. Rob, first of all, thank you for all you're doing. The St. James Apartments, I haven't been inside them, but it looks fabulous from the outside, and it's a great upgrade when you turn on off of Lamont Street. So thank you for all you've done thus far. George, this might be a rapid fire for you. The first floor of this development, is that going to be zoned for the same types of things as the lofts? Would it be retail / doctor's office and the like?
Yeah, that'll all be addressed during land use, Jason, correct? I don't have the code in front of me, but yeah, that can all be addressed during the planning and zoning process.
Rob, couple things for you, if you would. The exterior, is the majority of this, are you looking at using limestone, or what would be the main?
Yeah, the current design is brick and stone. We haven't gone through the feasibility study yet, but the original intent was brick and stone.
Gotcha, great. And then another thing, and I don't know what you did with St. James, but I just got to say, living in the lofts, one of the reasons I chose here was the lack of sound travel. I mean, forget the trains, but just from unit to unit, and having 6 inches of concrete between units has been fabulous compared to a lot of newer construction. So I don't know if there's anything you were thinking along those lines or not between the units, but with the additional noise of the trains and stuff, it might be something worth doing. I know you got to make a buck, but it's definitely something that's been a welcome change here. The main thing, I wish I shared Trustee Snigowski's positive thought on the parking. I did initially when I looked at the plan, but then I did the math and it doesn't look so hot to me, and I could be off. Thing is, with what Rob has presented, I don't see how you could do different with the parking and stuff. I think it's great. I think you've got 55 underground spots and everything else, but what we've got is 67 units approximately, 55 underground parking spaces. That leaves us a 12 parking spot deficit. Now that's assuming everybody has 1 vehicle. I think you could go with probably 1.5. Some people are going to have 2 vehicles, some will have 1. So let's use 1.5 per unit. That means 100 people will be looking or expecting a parking spot. So the question lies in, will the village or whoever's managing this as apartments be promising those 100 spots, and how's that going to work? Because if you do, let's just say you promised 100 spots, you've only net gained around 11 spots total for public use. And if more people have 2 cars or the ability to reserve additional spots, now you're actually cutting into the number of public spots we have right now, but you've added 67 more living units. I know it's a problem, gang. You know I'm on that over here at the lofts, but it's just something the math doesn't look great to me, but at the same time, I'm not sure what could be done better in terms of the parking. I think it's going to come down to not the design, but the restrictions that you do or do not put in place. And George, like you said, I know you don't want to tell anybody, hey, you can't park or you don't have a parking spot, but you might come down to saying, hey, you only have 1 parking spot and everything else is up in the air or something like that. Those are my comments.
No, Matt, those details, and those are going to be great during planning and zoning, and Mark and Jason, and because we're going to dig in. I think we just got to think bigger picture. You look at, and just to address Kathy's comments as well on the train, I mean, things are going to be very different. Even when people go back to work, they're not taking the train, and that won't be forever, but I think things are changing. We have a lot of surface parking to the west of this site, probably too much, but those are issues that we'll deal with during planning and zoning.
Overall, though, I think I'm looking forward to it, whatever comes about of this. I know we got a lot of small business owners that simply need more people living within walking distance, and this is going to be a great addition.
Yep, thank you. Another one, I know that Michelle Fleener couldn't find the hand, but I told her she texted me, so I'll call her up. Michelle, if you go ahead, and then.
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute, so it took me.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. No problem.
Thank you. I was going to bring up the parking as well, so I can X that off my list.
No, you got it.
And I do appreciate, Rob, I think John Quinn might have had a little hand in that building. And well, first, let me backtrack. I have a bachelor's degree in design. I've been doing it for like 25, 30 years. So I can maybe put a little different view on things than most people. Rob, you did a beautiful job, as well as John. Again, I think you had a little hand in it, but it's just stunning. That building is stunning. My one concern, like the other women, I'm sorry I didn't keep names going, but I feel, in my professional opinion, that the height is way too high. And when you give me the height, are you counting the height of that tower, or are you going up the 5 stories? So, you know, that's one of my questions. I think what happened on the other building, the Cantina building, I don't even know what it's called anymore. That was way too high. That was 1 story high, in my opinion. It could have still come over the bridge and still had a beautiful view, but it cut 1 story too high. So I feel by adding this, it's you know, it's not going to be an asset. So that was, you know, one of my, a big concern, I should say. I like the idea of the brick, the stone, love that. I like the idea of, you know, maybe bringing in the French, you know, feel. So I do love that. But what happens when, let's say, the thing doesn't fill up, or the stores are empty, or, you know, how does, I'm not asking for answers now, but just considerations, like, you know, what happens then? You know, who takes that over, or what is the result to that? And then who keeps, you have some green. So who is in charge of keeping that up? Because I know in the other building, it seems to not be taken care of. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I don't get to my grass all the time either. But, you know, if we're going to have that again, you know, why are we having some green space? So, and I want green space. I'm not, you know, I want green space, but, you know, who's in charge of keeping that up? So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think those will be included in the conversations at the future phases too, because you're right. I mean, I want to, you know, go through the mistakes of the past. You know, I think that spot, we're actually maintaining it now to the west of it, and it's not our property. So no, yeah, it needs to be secured as part of any agreement that someone needs to be on the hook for maintenance of that green space if it comes to the fruition. The other, okay, yeah, since he texted me a while ago, Dennis B, I'll kind of call on you. Let's see. All right, we'll go on. I think Dennis is maybe away from the computer. Let's go to Gina. Gina, got Mr. Last name, but go ahead. I just unmuted you, Gina.
Great. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I got you. Go ahead.
All right. DiGregorio, by the way. But one of my concerns is that, again, the building looks beautiful, but echoing what some people have said about the green space, but also bringing up the history we have in this town of being presented with a beautiful plan like this that includes a park space and it includes public access things that residents will be able to use without being one of the people that rents the units, like the area around it, like the parking. And then later on down the road, somewhere in some meeting, it gets altered. And then the first thing on the chopping block is always green space and park space. The development behind my house was supposed to be a park, and now part of the designated space is now going to be another condo building. And I was just looking at the design, and one of the things that Dennis had brought up to me is in the diagram, it looks like there's road lead-ins to that spot that says it's going to be a green space. And I'm wondering if that's part of a possible expansion plan. And if it is, then I don't think we should go against that ordinance. I think if there's any plans to build that lot, that we should keep it the 3 levels. Because I believe that was the incentive to go 5 stories, wasn't it? So that we could maintain that as an open public access space.
Yes, so Gina, this is Rob. The original design intent was really to maximize the footprint of the area with the limitations of that drainage in Lamont Street. We had looked at what the potential would be with storefronts. There was a wish list of storefronts, residential, resident, common areas and so forth. And this is what we came up with. We reviewed previous drawings. There was no requirement for putting in a park. We had proposed a park because we said that we believe that a park would be something that would add a lot of value. We know that there's a lot of focus on the height. We never changed the design from what we originally proposed with the architect, only because we wanted to get feedback from the village, both the zoning and so forth, before the architect was going to proceed with the construction drawings. So this is the original concept. It was based off of the design intent to provide something that would give green space as well as maximize the footprint. So the discussions that we had earlier and the previous concepts were, well, if it was a matter of buying 2.78 acres, what would you do with it? A lot of developers wouldn't give away land to just put common areas on there. Now, I don't know what the final product's going to look like in regards to the park, the height of the building, the finish and so forth, but we're on that initial review phase of getting opinions. So nothing is permanent, but we had to start somewhere. And the original intent was, how do you get the most amount of beds in that space there and still have something that we believe is pleasing to that area? The original concepts were putting buildings both towards the Metro parking lot and Lamont Street. And then it was like, no, I don't think people are going to want to look straight at Lamont Road. So this is the original direction that we took. And we then, took it from not just the aesthetics, but then we also went into how practical would a floor plan look like? What are the size of the units? What's the breakdown between 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom, 1 bedroom dens? So it's still preliminary. So, if we wanted to come up with 3 or 4 different proposals to say, well, what if you kept it at 2 stories? How much of the park would there be? It's like, well, we're chasing our tail and spending a lot of money. We first started out with, let's see what the maximum density would be of that area and still maintain, green space and so forth. But remember, this is the concept. And it wasn't like we didn't take people's opinions originally when we presented it a few months ago. That was their opinion. We didn't change it. We added more, we worked on the floor plans to see what the density and the breakdown would be in order to do the feasibility study on revenue versus cost. So when somebody gives us their opinion on it's too tall, it's not that we're not considering it. It's all right. We have it down as one of the considerations. Now let's see.
If I could clarify a little bit, the point is, it is what it is. It's a 5-story building right now, but part of the proposal that softened the idea of having another tall building was, look at the park that you have next to it. And I'm more asking, do we have an assurance that if the building is going to be that tall, that park space will remain and that it won't also be developed in addition to having a 5-story?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no intent. We don't believe that anybody would want to live any closer to the railroad or to Lamont Road. And I think there's other areas in Lamont that we could invest in if we wanted to put another structure.
We could put a covenant on there too. So yeah, it's something we can.
But obviously that would be the proposal would have to include all of that. And, what does the park look like? Who's it used by and so forth? I mean, there's been discussions on whether there's water structures, is it used for, public events and so forth. We're like, hey, it's a green space. We looked at what the maximum the maximum parking would be in order to maximize the green space. And this is what we propose. But obviously all the comments are well accepted. And then, we'll get to the next phase and we'll start to ink some of the, some of the final designs.
Cool. Thank you. Dennis Billick, I know I couldn't get you before, but you want to go ahead? I unmuted you.
All right, I think I got it. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you.
All right, my question is, I'm assuming since you're close to bedrock, you're gonna have to blast on this property to get this job done? Correct?
No, I think Sal has already dealt with the civil engineer on this, and we'd have to go down to bedrock. So is what I understood, but I didn't get involved too much. Sal did. I don't think he's on the line. In regards to the civil engineering on this.
I was just curious.
It's relatively close.
Okay, yeah, because I was just curious if there was a blasting plan, if we had to be blasting for anything.
Never heard anything about blasting, but.
So then the expense, when you mentioned bedrock earlier in the meeting, then the expense is not really the bedrock, then it's just going underground. Bedrock really has nothing to, if anything, the bedrock's probably helping you with a better foundation, no?
Well, you know, one way or the other, the foundation has to go to bedrock. Whether you fill it in with garage parking or not is the other issue. But the overall envelope of the building still has to be secured to bedrock.
Right, but I mean, that's not uncommon. I mean, it's a great foundation out here. So I was just curious if you guys had to blast and how that was, if we did have to blast, how that was going to affect buildings in the area, and also.
Yeah, no, there was no discussions about blasting. The discussions had to do with parking, and when we originally looked at this, it was what's the maximum amount of parking we can get below the building versus maximizing the losing the green space. That's where the design study came into play. And the most we were able to get was 55, 56. And then you saw the proposal for I think it was 86 exterior parking, 50 something interior parking. But that was a study just to see what the maximum would be.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Dennis. Next one would be Jeanette Tabares. Unmuting you. No?
Oh, you unmuted me. Okay.
You're good to go.
I just wanted, thank you, George. I had problems getting on again, but it wasn't your fault. It was mine. I just can't get my computer to work the way I want. But anyway, I've been on. And I just want to say that looking at the building, it's a nice looking building. However, I agree that I think it has to be taken down at least 2 stories because it's going to stick up. It's going to cover whatever view that comes over that bridge. The other thing, though, I think that we have to wonder about is whether or not, I think everybody loses sight of where the money is coming from for these TIF districts. Basically, the money is coming from the taxes that you get from the people that live here now. And whatever you do with those TIF districts, it could last for 22 years. And it's going to cause the people to have higher taxes that already live here in order to support the schools and the other institutions that will not be getting the taxes. The other thing is I worry with regard to the underground parking. I hope that the canal will not end up in the underground parking. So I would really hope that, engineering that and getting it done is going to be done properly so there's not any problems. So the height, and then I'm sorry, but I don't agree with that bridge or Lamont Street sign. I think it takes away from the building. I don't think it fits in or belongs there. So I'd be opposed to having that up there. But please remember that this is coming from the taxes that people pay. I've been paying taxes for 32 years. So that's the way I feel. Sorry.
Thanks, Jeanette. You might have missed the part of the meeting earlier when we talked about TIF. It's his taxes that the developer's paying that goes into a fund and then it's rebated back. But no,
Okay.
the point is well taken.
Well, one other thing, we were talking about really 2 different projects here tonight. Now, the Canal one is in the Canal TIF district. What is the other one in? Is it in the TIF district or is it in TOD district?
TOD.
TOD. So you've got two different taxing districts there. So you may want to keep it separate. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks, Jeanette.
bye.
Right, I think, and I keep Stephanie Kovacek. I couldn't find her, but you might be the last one. You get the last word, Stephanie. No? Oh, I just unmuted you. Go ahead. All right, Stephanie.
George, she still looks muted.
I keep hitting unmute. She looks
How's that?
confused. Yep, gotcha.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Well, I was just thinking 67 rental units. That seems never the same as private ownership. Private ownership means folks who take a personal interest in the safety and success of our community, in our schools, property values, the crime in our town. You know, and that's another thing that I just heard recently that's a little off course here, that that we will not be rehiring police that have retired. And I'm thinking of so many more people in a building that size than with the Forge, and not to keep an adequate police department. See, a lot of folks have already covered what I wanted to say. I still think parking is a problem. I know there was an engineer one time who, when we held meetings for the public to understand what's going on and what's being proposed some months ago, there was an engineer who came and said that there's something to do with the granite under the building and something to do with the stones that you couldn't build an underground parking lot. So, you know, I'm sure you must have checked into that or checked it twice. And I just don't think there's enough adequate parking either. And as far as the appearance, I don't care for the bridge and really the building itself, but that's just my personal opinion. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stephanie. All right. Does anybody else have anything? I do have one I'll read into the record because he couldn't make the meeting here. Rick Lycard. He sent an email to the board. He would like me to read this because he couldn't make the meeting. Just including my and many others' position 1 through 5, nothing above current building height, no downtown ordinance variances, no working around planning and zoning, no rental this large with one owner oversight, no TIF funding. Something about this project has been unsettling in my soul since first learning of how it came about. I encourage you to pay Marabella for the tear down of the buildings. So that's from Rick Lycard. I think everybody else who emailed me was able to speak. So anything else for? All right, Mayor, do you have anything else for the board or Jason or me, and we can move on?
No, thanks, George, for handling that. And thank you for everyone's input. Much appreciated. Great turnout, at least for our first item. And I don't know if any other of the trustees have any other input. If not, we could move on to the MWRD parcels that we're working with them on.
Let me just switch PowerPoints and give me a minute here, but yeah, that was a long first item. Give me just a second here. Thank you, everybody, and Rob and everybody else who spoke. We'll move on to the next item.
It's nice to see the group here. I feel like I'm back at the Spears call. I miss some of you. I have been asked to bring those back, so we might have another one coming up.
What?
might do another CARES call. This, I got the gallery view, so it reminds me of.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we're gonna move on with our agenda here and then, that did not work. Hold on. We're almost there. Well, we said everyone has their day of technical glitches, and Charlene had hers last week. This is mine. Not to throw her under the bus or anything. Which I just did, so I. All right.
There you go.
All right, thank you, everybody, and feel free to stick around, or you can catch this later. But just a quick update. I know we had a couple meetings with the Park District Board, and we talked about this at a couple other committee of the wholes. Village has had a history of working with MWRD, the Water Reclamation District, on leasing village-owned or MWRD-owned land primarily for recreation and public use. The forest just opened up this weekend, and hundreds of acres have been. The village had the foresight decades ago to lease property in the quarry area, and those are some success points. And Safety Village, the village and the Park District now have cooperated to lease from the MWRD property owned by the district for the Safety Village. Typically what happens is that as long as it's for public use, which typically a municipality will engage a leasehold right project for, the village can secure the lease for 39, 50-year period for recreation, and the cost is next to $0. It's a nominal fee per year. You just have to work according to MWRD's policies and protocol. So talked about this last time at the foot of the downtown, kind of adjacent to what we were just talking about with Marabella, as an opportunity that the village has talked about. It could have been in Jason's history lesson 20 years ago when the old Tri-Central terminal closed down. The village at the time had concerns with a new industrial user going in this site right at the foot of our downtown. Since the old bridge went away, I mean, essentially this industrial user, if it went here, would be landlocked, and all the trucks would be coming in and out of our town. So definitely we wanted to keep it for recreational use. I think now we have a great opportunity. We've been working with the district on co-leasing the site with MWRD, from MWRD for recreation. And I think it's important to recognize that it's a long-term phased-in plan, 15, 20 years on improvements. Again, I just talked about securing property for parking. I think the village and the park just trying to secure property in the downtown and near the downtown for a park use. So we recently made the request of MWRD. They've been very accommodating at their last Thursday board meeting. And a zoomed in shot of the Tri-Central site. Here's Stephen Street, the end of Stephen Street. You'll see was resurfaced to about River Road just recently. If you can continue on and then going to the west, these 27 acres is available for public use. So the village made a request with the district. The district on Thursday approved the authorization for the village and the Park District to lease it. Again, if I go to the next page of preliminary uses for the site, it's mainly going to be passive recreation, at least in the short term. And when I say short term, I'm talking 5, 10, 15 years. The first step would be to secure the lease, would be to complete some remediation, and the district's been very helpful with allowing it to get pushed all the way to the west of the site. It's a massive site. It's probably the size of our entire downtown. Push all materials west, cap it, and then could start with a passive path program on the site. And what's really unique is that this could be a new landing place for bike path recreation. We're working with our neighbors on potentially connecting the trails in this area. Really a good opportunity. The MWRD has agreed to lease it. The next step would be for the village and the Park District to work together on an intergovernmental agreement that will outline the improvements on the site, the use of the site. And then both boards would then approve a lease with the district. And I had a good call today with MWRD that the leases are pretty, their position is they're giving you property for free, that you have to essentially take, their provisions in their lease without much pushback. But one thing we were able to, talk to the district about is have a plan for the overall site. And here it is right here. And this will change over time, but is to give the village and the park district time, and we're talking years to fulfill the plan. But also there's other provisions in the lease that are very favorable to the village and the park district. If at some point the village and the park were able to make money on the site, then we wouldn't have to share it with MWRD and to a certain point. So it's very favorable terms in the lease. The next step would be, again, to talk to you guys about any, as we start to talk with the park, any particular, points that we need to kind of get started with the park district that you want to include in an IGA, as this thing will move as quick as we want it or as slow as we want it, but definitely have a board at the MWRD who's willing to work with us, and could be a really good project, right at the foot of our downtown. You'll see I'll turn it up for questions, but phase 0 would be essentially the remediation phase. That would be the first step before doing anything on the site, is to make it habitable for use. And then you can start programming to start with pathways. There wouldn't be any structures on the site anytime in the near future, other than maybe a bathroom, a couple bathrooms, similar to what you see in other parks. But definitely a complement to the park district's activities, ours, the Forge. It could be a really good project, and just excited to have the partnership with MWRD and Lamont Park District. So I wanted to bring it up. We had a meeting last month, and you guys asked me to bring it up one more time if there's any further thoughts on use of the site and the next steps.
Hey, George, just one quick comment. Again, want to thank especially MWRD, as well as the Park District. I know this land was talked about before. Again, the village, we don't have the resources, to maintain this land. It's a great benefit to the village for us to get access to this land, because if we don't, this land is available for industrial use if other users went to MWRD. So it's critical that we access this land. And again, we appreciate the Park District, their board, leadership, as far as working with them. Again, they've put together a long-range plan. As you mentioned, this is probably, upwards of a 15 to 30 year type of plan, but at least to lock it up in the short term, and to have the Park District work with us, and for it to be passive, I think it's we're very lucky to have two relationships. So just wanted to share that, publicly. With that being said, any other comments or questions by the trustees on working on this IGA?
George, you said there was is there a 25% revenue share on?
Yeah, that was the key component we got into the lease, which isn't very common, is that, the way MWRD works, and it makes sense, is that if you're going to lease their property for $0, that if you make money, you have to share with them. What we wanted to put in there, we don't really anticipate making money on it in the short term, but we wanted in the lease that in the event we do make money, before we start sharing that money with the MWRD, that we can credit all the improvements that have gone towards the site before we start sharing. So, I mean, the village, from our standpoint, running, water out to the site, fixing the road, any remediation, the park districts, we can include all of those costs in the calculation before we have to share any money with the district. So it makes sense to recover our costs over time. The other component, that you'll see in the staff report, it's basically every use under the sun, pathways, volleyball courts, tennis courts, I think is in there. Really, that was from their direction, that put as much in there as possible so that you don't have to come back and amend the lease. So I think we're still looking at, getting some input from the community, the park district as well. I know the H Corps is going to talk about this week, and there's still going to be time to really plan what this site could be, get some public input. Right now, we're just naming everything under the sun, so we don't have to go back through the process again.
Thanks.
The other thing that was a key one is that, the prohibited uses, it's a little bit confusing probably in my staff report, but in many of their leases, they prohibit alcohol from being on the property. And again, we're not throwing any parties out there anytime soon, but we wanted that included, that in the event we had events out there and we were serving alcohol, we could do so. And the district understands, as long as you're giving them your insurance documents and submitting to them annually your events that you might be putting down here. They're usually good with that. So we got that in the district as well. We got it a 50-year lease. That's about as long as they go now, but I think it makes sense for the site. Anything else from the board? I might not see your hand, so if you just go ahead. Anybody else from the board? Then I'll kind of turn it over. So yeah, I'll turn it over real quick. We had one hand up, and then we'll conclude and move on. Jeanette DeBarris, lower your hand and unmute you. Go ahead, Jeanette.
Okay, I just wanted to mention, it might be a good idea to do at least a phase 1 study with regard to any contamination on the property. Because if you're going to have people going on there, you want to make sure it's safe. Did any of that come up in the lease agreement that the MWRD?
We're working with the MWRD on that. We've been studying it, from a village standpoint for the last 15, 20 years. There's still some monitoring. They before any lease gets entered into, a full remediation plan that the MWRD agrees to will be executed. And we'll have that at a future meeting. But yeah, that's over the life of the lease. There'll be provisions in there, but yeah, to answer your question directly, yes, we were going through that process.
Okay, all right. Appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. So yeah, that's anything else on this project, and we can kind of. One thing I want to thank Senator Curran was able to get us a couple grants on Stevens Street. You're seeing a fresh coat of pavement out there, and I know Ralph is adding some ADA accessibility ramps and crosswalks. You're starting to see Stevens Street really take shape, and as we run a water line even further down, we'll resurface again, and you'll see over time. I know it's hard to see now, but that the overpass, we painted it. But we're going to fix the rocks, and the road back there will get you'll start to see it connects well with the rest of the downtown, and I think it'll be a really good project. All right, with that, I will move it on.
Okay. Do we need to talk anything else about MWRD outside of Tri-Central?
The one thing I will, real quick, I think I can get this done this is a cool tool if you ever are bored. You'd be pretty bored to use this, I suppose, but Jason and I are on here all the time. It is pretty interesting. MWRD is probably the largest landowner in Lamont, would you say, Jason, still? So they own a ton of property in Lamont, all along the canal. Every one of these parcels with a number on it is owned by MWRD. And they typically, especially in Cook County, they will not sell. They'll lease it, and everything in pink on the screen is already leased up. So you can go on there and see which industries on each parcel. You could see corporate use. This is the large water reclamation plant that's east side of Stevens Street. Out here are the 2405, 2502, 2501. Those are all leased by the village already for another 20 years or so. Same thing up here. You go, here's the parcel we're talking about if you zoom in. So it's available. Talk to the district too about rezoning it. Once we have control of it, they'll get a letter of no objection to us and we can get it rezoned. Not a huge deal. We're not going to put industrial out there, but we'll officially get that rezoned to recreational. There are other sites that are available that we check on periodically. If the district believes in the short term they can make money off of it, typically they won't let it go for public use. Makes sense, right? But there's a couple sites out here that maybe we'll have the H-Corps look at. I'm starting to kick around from staff. One of them's in the village, one is just outside the village. But just, who would have thought 20 years ago securing the quarry sites could be used how they're being used now. Especially if there's very little downside, might make sense to grab these potential connectivity to future trails in the area. These sites, because they've been vacant for so long, we would do an environmental assessment. Typically, there's nothing on them other than dumping. There is some fly dumping happening, so we just got to be careful of that. But I think it's just being strategic on where we secure land. There's also they own property in all counties pretty much along the canal, but if you go further west, here's the ones we talked about potentially securing out in Will County. Again, for $0 if they're available. Very little downside. A lot of these pressures, there has not been industry like Trace Central. There's really been nothing other than a little fly dumping. But just go on. I'll send this link out to the board if you have any opportunity to play around. There's one just west of the downtown here, 2205, that actually they're holding on to for potential use in the future. But yeah, it's a good opportunity to be partners with the district and like I said, our largest landowner.
All right, thanks, George. Anything else on this?
No.
Okay. All right. My phone died on me, which has the agenda. What's the
All right,
third
we're
item?
moving along before we get to your favorite topic, pension. I'm making you wait to the end. So let's see, go back to. Well, I will, since I don't. All right, I'm losing it here, but I'll kick it off. This is the Walker Road. If my slideshow doesn't work, you can see it from there. Walker Road, Railroad Crossing, Phase 1 engineering study. We talked about this at a previous Zoom meeting. We've been desirous of having a crossing at Walker Road. I think it goes back even before the last recession when there was a development out at Walker Road. Private development took a crack at it. The Forge took the lead on it probably about 2 or 3 years ago. Didn't get a whole lot accomplished. There were a lot of delays from the ICC, from Canadian National. And then what ended up happening, which is better for everybody right now, is that the Forge turned their Phase 1, their vision for Phase 1 north of the I&M Canal. Otherwise, they would have been waiting several years for opening up. And I think this weekend was a success. We could talk about that later. But Phase 1 is moving on the north side of the canal. I think everyone agrees that the preferred entrance to the Forge would be on this, Main Street, but we have all sorts of issues with the railroad. We've picked it back up. I think it makes sense from the village to here's the train right now coming through my office, but we picked it back up. I think it makes sense from a village standpoint to take the lead on it. We've engaged at least early stages an engineer to look at it, and we've assembled a team, including the ICC, Canadian National, Metra, Amtrak, anybody else who will come listen, IDOT, to really look at this area. And it is a priority for all these entities. There's been a couple severe accidents, even critical death in these two, the Boyer Street crossing, the McGuire Street crossing. It's been on the radar for the ICC for several years. They were excited when we kind of took it up, and we've talked to them about potentially participating in a funding for a solution. And we think we got them about 95% of the way there. At least a commitment over the phone, and the letter is coming, I am told. The problem is, you know, and then the ICC jumped in. What they would like to do based on their funding commitments is to fund, they would fund it, but they want a grade separated solution. So basically, and this is pretty common, at grade crossings are usually, you know, they're very difficult to get it. Now that they want to reduce exposure on the line. So they want to have it completely separated. So they said they would like us to look at an overpass solution. And once we start talking about overpass, you start talking about big dollars. But the ICC has stepped up and said, hey, we will fund the majority of the project as long as we're able to, you know, continue to move forward, apply for grants, work with private industry in the area to fund the remaining portion. The problem, I think, looking at our strategy for funding, and I have it included in the staff report, I think we have a really good shot at securing a lot of the funding. We're in for our Council of Government funding at the STP level. Scored really high this project. The ICC commitment, there's a lot of federal money that's out there for railroad projects. We think we can piece it together. The problem in the short term is that in order to make the project a little more real for those solutions is you have to engineer it first, at least a preliminary. We did this with a couple other. You look at the bridge over the sanitary ship canal. We've moved forward and started to do an engineering project on it. There's a lot of hurdles out here and basically the project gets a little more real when you start to engineer it, you study it. So I have a proposal here included for your review, and to move it anywhere further, we're going to have to engage an engineer. And this is the proposal. It's a lot of work. You're looking at over 1,200 hours as you calculate it all up. You know, you're engaging consultants, surveys. There's wetlands. If you look at the next page, all sorts of floodplain issues out here. You know, I think from our standpoint, we need to run with the ball, otherwise it'll never get done. Kind of how I feel about it. And there's great potential out here, and we would have to fund a solution at the preliminary level. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier today, we could also pass a resolution in conjunction with it that if and when the village establishes a tax increment district out in this area, that we could recoup those funds. You know, we did that elsewhere at the Will County site for the gas station. So just something for the future. Again, we would have to come out of pocket, but we potentially could be reimbursed in the future if this becomes a larger scale economic development kind of region for the village. So it's a big number. I talked to Chris a little bit about it. This project is in, you know, future years of the capital budget, but it's moving quicker than I think we thought when we budgeted. In order to get it going and start with IDOT, and we really need to enter in a contract now. This process is every bit of 12 to 14 months. So it's a long project, but you got to start somewhere. So I just want to get everyone's thoughts on, you know, on moving forward on this project. I mentioned we don't have any jurisdiction out at Boyer and McGuire, and you know, so we want to solve the problems out here, but you know, I think that we need help from everybody in the area. And phase one engineering is when you start to bring all the players in and you kind of secure that help.
Hey, George, all right, let's leave phase one engineering by itself. The remainder of the project, you mentioned securing other funding. How much, you know, what percentage of that funding can we secure? And can you just, you know, I'm familiar with STP. You want to just, you know, fill everyone else in as far as the other potential fundings that we have access to?
The big one that we, over the phone, and we, you know, we had a meeting recently with the ICC, and we really pressed them and said, hey, you know, we want to, you know, solve this issue for everybody, but we need commitments. And so they called back and they were confused because they thought they already gave the commitments. I'm like, no, I need something in writing. You know, this is great. People leave all the time, and But no, they come back like, no, they send us a letter, exactly what you need, and we've done that. What they've committed to is 60% of the total project, at least, up to 6 million out of state money, the state MFT money. That's a big number, and because the state's the hardest to get money from, obviously. Federal Southwest Conference, we're in for a grant for 3 million. There's local matches. So and as part of this solution, there would be, grant writing for all the agencies. There's other grade separating fund. IDOT has funding opportunities. The good thing is for railroad crossings, there is money out there. I can't, obviously we can't guarantee anything. We can have the engineer out at the next meeting. I thought this one was going to be too long for them, and you can kind of talk through those solutions, but that all happens during phase 1 engineering. Anything on that?
Does anyone else have any issues with moving forward or any questions?
This is Stapleton. Question. Is the upper road going to go over the railroad or under?
Over. It's still early in the process, and that's the problem when you talk to some of the players in the area. The solution that we're going to come up with here is not going to be perfect for everybody. But we're trying to keep everybody calm and say, hey, let the process play out. It needs to get up about 12 to 15 feet over the tracks, and then it'll come back down, and anything can be engineered. More than likely we'll go over. It doesn't necessarily have to be at Walker, and that's what we told everybody. It could be, a project this big, you could acquire land to, curl it a little bit further east. The problem is that there's that massive floodplain there. It's really an interesting area. If you go back in the quarry area, this is where the waterfall is. So it may not be here. It may be the best spot for it, but maybe not. And I think that's part of the process, is that we come up with multiple options, and then you kind of present them to players in the area. Rick, I think Rick had a question.
Yeah, you talked about engaging an engineer. Have you already got someone in mind?
Yeah, I would recommend, that's the proposal with Knight, and they've done a lot of work, Knight Engineering, early on, a couple of years ago. I know that Congressman Lipinski's office recommended them. There's a few.
Now they're very good at railroads, so I've
worked with the railroad.
In fact, they've been involved with the tollway up on the one up at O'Hare. So I'm just wondering who you were talking about, if you had decided.
Yeah, it would be Knight Engineering. They've already done a lot of work. They have a plan, and they've done a lot of work already, and just coordinating meetings, and now it's easier with Zoom, but we're starting to meet with all the neighboring property owners, talking about it, but they really need to start digging in now.
George, would this project eliminate at least the the blowing of horns for at least these two overpass?
Yeah, that's we talked about quiet zone in the past, and alone this doesn't do it, but without coming up with a solution out here, you'll never get a quiet zone. So this is a necessary step. Once you eliminate Boyer and McGuire, and actually Walker, because it would be, if it was an overpass, there's no need to do a horn. It could stay quiet as you get closer to the downtown, and then there could be another improvement, I think, at KA Steel Road, where then you can go quiet. But without addressing this area, you're never going to go quiet.
Not to complicate getting the funding from other entities. We might want, if there is, again, Knight Engineering, the phone calls I've been on have been excellent to work with, as far as their relationships with the state, and being able to assist in securing, well, it was the ICC, correct, George, as far as so obviously they know each other very well, and so it's been a pleasure working with Knight Engineering. I'm throwing this out there not to muddy the, the waters per se, but if we're able to get additional funding and there's money available, like, potentially there can be, we might want to throw potentially adding, if we can, the quiet zone for the whole town. Obviously, it's going to eliminate it for these 3 sites, but, kill 2 birds with one stone.
Yeah, we did work years ago on it. You're starting to look at, you'd have to make an improvement at, the project we were just talking about. You'd have to make an improvement at Lamont Street. That was one that always kind of came up. Because you have room to install quad gates, they call them, at that location. You don't have any room at Stephen Street. Stephen Street's really tough. I mean, it's an old town and it's narrow there, but Lamont Street, you'd have enough room to install something that could get you enough points to go quiet. We could look at that though. Anything?
Okay.
So
No other,
Are you guys good? We'll moving this forward to a formal agenda and just getting it going again. We would make sure that we could reimburse ourselves one day. And I think we looked at this, a couple of years ago, starting a TIF, and it was just too raw at that point. But maybe it's time to look at it again. No hurry, but this whole area has potential. It's just, and really, I mean, the Forge, I mean, the best case scenario with this project is a 3 or 4 years out, best case scenario. Maybe IDOT is improving Main Street. It's in phase 2 engineering. That'll happen right around the same time. So you start to see this area taking shape if everything goes right.
What was the estimated cost of the engineering, George? Did you have that?
Yeah, about 490,000. And that's inclusive of studies and yeah, it's in the, I'll send it back out to everybody. It's quite the project. If you're looking at, if it is an overpass solution, and I know people in the area disagree about the need for it, but ultimately the ICC is going to make that call. You're looking at a $8 to $10 million project. I mean, this is quite a project, but got to start somewhere here.
It's okay with me, George.
Good. The other part of it, and it kind of goes hand in hand, but something I've talked to a couple of you guys about is engaging a federal consultant that could help with advocacy services at the federal level for grants. And I have that agreement in the packet for you guys to look at too. It would be someone to work hand in hand with the engineers and for this project. But we have, if you look at we have some pretty big ambitious projects that locally we don't have the funding. If we don't get big federal grants, we're not going to be able to do the bike bridge. This project, the I&M Canal, we're going to need some massive federal money, and it might be. I think it's a good idea to look at for a short period of time, maybe a year, to try to engage a specialist and to try to get some funding on these big projects. So I just want to, that's something that you guys got to, give me some feedback on if that's the route we want to go. If you want to, meet further on it, but I think it's even if we get one big project, you've kind of made out even our water and sewer. Infrastructure will, the 1% was great, but it's not gonna cover all these projects, right? So. Any thoughts on that? No, I just kind of, it's late and I sprung it on you, but something to look at. We could talk.
It makes sense to me, George.
Yeah.
I think you're looking for some feedback, so I'll start it off.
Cool. Yeah, if there's anybody who has an issue with it, the firm has worked closely with the Will County Governmental League. Plainfield has been successful. Bedford Park. think they represent Cook County as well in some areas. So it's a good, and they helped us out with a grant we just received. So it's, I think it's worthwhile.
You're referring to the Lipinski's water grant?
Correct.
Which was $500,000. So these guys
Bill-
apparently have contacts and
Close to 2
you know,
million.
and they have, yeah, $2 million. Yeah. And they've delivered. So, you know, if anyone else has any other issues or questions, follow up with George.
Thank you. All right, I will, let's move it along here. And I owe Chris lunch because I made her wait to the very end. Chris, are you still here? or no?
Yep.
All right, last item, the budget calendar discussion, and then we do have a short PowerPoint on the police pension. So go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so on the budget calendar, you know, we discussed probably 2-3 months ago that we would consider changing our budget year from May 1st to January 1st. And I was all for it. I know George was all for it. It would help in the reporting. It would help just to kind of streamline everything. And all, you know, I reached out to the state, Cook County, a lot of the grant portals that we have, and very positive feedback for us switching until I actually went into our ERP system. And basically on the ERP system, we would have to reconfigure because we already have the year for the partial year. So we would have to reconfigure all our funds. So set up all the new funds, new account numbers. We have 5 different modules that actually link everything to the ERP system. So it would be it would be several hours. We would have to have new trainers come in. You know, I just kind of did a quick cost between that and having to do 2 audits, one for the stub year and one for the full year. It would range between, you know, 55 to 70,000, maybe even more in time, because it would be our time reconfiguring everything. And I just don't think at the time right now, with the pandemic and with the way our revenues are at, that it would be an investment that is a nice to have, that we should really move over to a calendar fiscal year. I think every year we should take a look at it to see whether or not it would be feasible. But if we would change this year, we would have the pandemic with the revenues going that way and the expenditures. And then we would also have this. So really, to match any historical data we would almost start from scratch, like we started a new ERP system. So we just decided, you know, my recommendation is not to move this year, this time. And so now we can go into the pension. I just wanted to give
Christus, I know everyone, and that's more, I know we were bummed, but all the costs would be crazy, but just your and Darshana's staff time. We're running thin on bandwidth now, and just not worth it. We'll look at it next year, and we'll keep going along on May 1st. So go ahead.
Yeah. And I've been getting, you know, a lot of my time too. And I've been, you know, we've been putting together a lot of grants that would pull my time away from that and just basically trying to convert over the fiscal year. So I'd rather try to see what kind of grants we can have out there and use my time for that versus trying to switch over to a fiscal year.
Yep. All right.
Okay, so I just wanted to give the board a heads up. Basically, the Lauterbach and Amon did a really, really nice slide presentation for the pension boards. This last, and I have to move, I have it. Hang on. Okay, there we go. So they basically did the recommendation for next year, and the pension board has not put together their formal request or anything, but I did want to notify our board because it is coming. And the current year, the levy recommendation is going to be over $1 million. They're going to add maybe, you know, a couple $1,000 like they historically have for expenditures, but we're going to go from 855,000 to $1,039,039 just in the minimum recommendation for the levy for next year. And I just wanted to give the boards a heads up because this is over $1 million and you add IMRF and you add Social Security, we're going to be, you know, at $1.7 million in just pensions of our like 3.6, 3.9 tax levy, depends where we're going to be at. But that is we're getting very close to a lot, you know, a third of it or even more, almost half of it is going to end up being pensions. And then I also wanted to show you, you know, we're doing right now our audit and we're plugging in all the pensions and we were 70%, now we're at 67%. So kind of just wanted to give the boards a heads up. This is kind of, if you wanted to take a look at this later, this is just like the benefits, you know, the risk management they talk about, you know, the expected rate of return, we still have it at 7. But right now, you know, the ratio, you know, we're running a lot lower than 7. But if we would move it down to 6.5, our contribution would have to go up 10%, 10.38. So you're talking, you know, over $100,000 that would have to go up too if we would reduce our return on investment. They did if you want to go to the next one, I know I'm going fast on this, but they did the demographic changes on that. They looked at retirees, they looked at inactive members, and they just do a nice, what changed and what didn't change, but they always change their assumptions. So the next one talks about the assumption changes, and then the plan changes, and that had to do with the tier 2. They voted, they changed the salary cap for the tier 2, so that affected our contributions. And so then they kind of just put it in here on what changes. And, you know, the assumption changes were $52,000. And expenses, and then our market returns. And I do want to, you know, down below, our market return was a negative 2.3% this last year. Now, you know, we were talking about second quarter, and second quarter was, you know, 14%, but we ended the year, our fiscal year, of a negative 2.3%. We were supposed to end it at 7%, our rate of return. So that is an issue.
Hey,
And
Chris,
we went,
real quick, I was supposed to text Chief, but I'll let him sleep probably, but he was at the pension meeting. Have they started to give guidance on this transition that's going to happen from local to state pooled? And how long is that going to take when the consolidation?
they have not given, when I was in the meeting, because the attorneys were on there is, but due to COVID, there is like, I had 8 to 16 hours worth of training on this transition. And we were supposed to start it in 4-hour increments, and we haven't even started it yet. So I know they've put together the boards, but I haven't heard all the transition's going to take several years.
Yeah. Okay.
So the other one that I want to show, I don't know what number, the unfunded liability, the 5-year, there's a 5-year average of our contributions. We've always contributed way more than what the recommendation was. And then that's that. But I do want to say, and I don't know if that was on page 2, but it does say on page 2, our unfunded went from 7.9% to 9.6%. I mean, 7.9 million, sorry, to 9.6 million. So our unfunded liability has gone up extremely high, and that's on page 2 of that report. Now keep going up. Keep going up. Keep going. That one. So that is a tell-all, because we went from 70% funded to 67% funded, and our liability went from 7.9 to 9.6.
Supposed to give us good news, Chris. Come on.
I know.
So Chris, can you go to the page near the end where it showed what our recent year contributions were?
Right here.
Okay, so last year we paid almost 900,000, year before 800.
Yeah.
800, 670, 620. And now this year, we have to pay how much?
11039. They, we'll add a little bit money for expenditures, but it's going to be,
Okay.
it's going to be over $1 million.
So we went from 900,000 to $1 million.
Yes.
And yet our unfunded dropped 1.7 million. So we keep funding what they tell us to, and our unfunded liability is still skyrocketing. So again, you guys all know how I feel about this. I think being 70% is still 30% off of being what we should be funded, but I understand that, relative to other communities, we're superstars. And, if that's what, the general consensus is, then maybe we just keep chugging along at what they tell us to do. I know we talked about maybe doing a,
John, let me ask you, if we were at 100%, what difference would it make? We're still going to end up short the following year, no matter what.
No, but you don't have to pay $1 million. You're not coming out of pocket. We'd only have to pay a fraction of $1 million. So if
You
we
have
were,
to fund whatever your liability is regardless. And if your return is going to be negative 9.3%, you're going to have to pay that regardless also.
but the $1 million, the biggest piece of the $1 million that we're paying is because we're underfunded. If we were at
What is the
100%,
interest amount? What is the interest amount of our 1.39 million? Do we know that?
Chris, wasn't it?
That's what you're saying. What you're saying is it's costing us interest. So
it's costing us, yeah, I think last year, we 2/3 of what we paid is because we're underfunded. So
okay,
if, instead of paying 900,000, we would only had to pay 350 or something like that.
Okay.
So we're paying juice of like 600,000. I'm going by memory here. So-
I understand. So you're saying 2/3 of our contribution each year is juice.
Yeah, is because we're unfunded. Yep.
Okay, well, that answers my question then. We would still need to fund whatever, 3.6.
Growth, yeah, right. If
Or
we didn't hit
360, I mean.
7%, yeah, if
Right.
we didn't hit 7%, then we'd still have to fund it, correct?
Okay.
So again, maybe, because I heard it during our last referendum, I had residents say, hey, John, you know what, you guys, we're really good as far as where we're funded. I'm like, okay. But, again, I don't know if, what other thoughts are on this. Do we think about maybe trying to go to the residents, and because again, we're going to keep, it's like, obviously you guys well know this. It's like having a really big outstanding, credit card bill in our own households, and you keep paying juice on it. Whereas if you're able to get a low interest rate loan, we would be able to get potentially a loan on this for, I don't know what the interest rates are now, but they're very low in the 2 or 3%. So we'd be paying a loan on 2 or 3%, yet theoretically, we'd be getting returns from the market at 7%. Now, obviously, we didn't do that this year, but, the law of averages at the time, that's why they have it at 7%. So anyway,
what would the difference be between, let's say, whatever, 3% or 2.8, whatever number you want to pick on what we would get the loan for? And I'm not disagreeing with you, John. I'm more agreeing with you than not. And what are we paying percentage wise on the juice? Are we paying 6.5? So are we going to gain 4% then?
Well, I think the simple math would be, we'd be picking up, if the returns do hit what they should, which we have to take them for their assumptions, 7%, and we're paying 2% on the loan, then potentially we can pick up 5% on our unfunded liability, which Chris, you said is now almost $10 million.
It's 9.6, yeah.
Yeah, so we'd be picking up 5% on 9.6 million, which is,
So 460.
500. Yeah,
We were-
$500,000 almost.
John, I get where you're going on it. Is this really the year to do a referendum? At this point, we're going into
No, I
recession.
think it's just informational.
Okay.
I just want to know, hey, am I am I out of my mind in thinking this, right?
The only thing that I think is we're not paying a juice, right? The difference in a juice is it's lost money, right? We're losing opportunity costs, but if we took a $5 million loan out and we lost 2%, right, we would have lost money that we're already paying interest on. So right now the
You're
juice is
losing it.
going.
You are losing money though. You're paying additional, you're paying $1 million, whereas you don't need to be paying $1 million.
I'm paying $1 million to myself though, is what I'm saying, right?
No,
Whereas
you're
the
out
juice,
of pocket. You're out of pocket $1 million. We're out of pocket $1 million this year. We have to cut a check, right, Chris?
Yeah.
That's what you're recommending, $1 million.
I'm just saying we're paying it to ourselves essentially though, because this is our fund. As opposed to, we're not losing the $1 million, right? The $1 million is still going in there, and
It's $1 million of tax. It's $1 million of taxpayer money that cannot be used for anything, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get it. I look at it a little different, but
and we're losing out on the arbitrage of making market returns of 7% while only paying a bond at 2%. So we're actually losing 5% of market returns.
except, yeah,
Does that
in the
make
long
sense to
term,
you?
yeah. No, I completely understand. I get the concept. It's just, I don't think we really make 7%. I think our problem, our challenge is we're not making 7% even on the good years or going over.
Correct. They said on the average of the 5-year average for the last 5 years, we made 4.46%.
So now you're at 2%.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, go back in time. Go back 10 years. Go
Yeah.
back. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
I
it's
think
it's
so.
much higher than that.
I think it had run it, but I think if you look at IMRF, and that's where the pension's going, where you start putting all your funds into a collective pot, and you can make more money. But IMRF, if you look at a 30-year average, IMRF, they've made 10%. I mean, that's where you need to get. So when it finally gets consolidated, then maybe you look at doing a referendum. And the whole thing about doing a pension bond signals some distress. So you think if you do just a property tax increase where you over a 5-year period you put all that money into the pension, that's probably how you run it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going is, as well as that, John, that consideration to me is when we consolidate. I think at this point I think that's a consolidation issue where we have the opportunity to make more. We're not making the 10% IMRF is making over the last 30 years. I thought we talked about this last year where our numbers were way low because we're stuck with a more passive investment portfolio.
Yeah. Ron was being good. Let's get your hand up, Ron.
Yeah. We run this real Pat Nardi and see what is.
Run it by who? Bernardi?
Bernardi, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't, the problem with, even though the logic is sound for issuing a pension bond, he said it could knock your credit rating down. It signals distress. If you do it a different manner, the same end goal would be, or result would be you increase your property tax levy by X amount over a 5-year period. That's probably how you do it. But today's point, it's tough to do that right now. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
And again, I just want to make sure that we're being the best stewards, goes without saying of, again, it's just frustrating because every year, where does that 150,000 of extra money come from, Chris? That we went from what, 850 or 860 to now $1 million?
Yes. And
Where does that money come from?
it's going to have to come from the amount of money that goes into the corporate for property taxes. So it goes into the general fund. It's going to have to be taken away from that. So you have the reduction of the probably the income tax and the sales tax over the year. And then we're going to have to reduce that as well.
Yeah. And I get it, Dave. I mean, this is not, any type of increases. There's never a good time for that. But again, just trying to look at, the long-term versus, short-term sightedness, right?
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Chris, you want to end on some positive?
Okay, and I just want to show the last 2 graphs that we received our July income tax for the year, and then our retail sales tax. Our July income tax is going to be going up because, like I said before, the spike that's in May all the time, that's because everybody, submits their taxes on April 15th, and then it takes till May. So July and August are going to spike, and then it's going to go down again because, the taxes were due July 15th. They're anticipating that the income tax will go down based on the unemployment rate, of course, and the corporate taxes. So that one will be going down, but I just wanted to mention the spike is because of the income taxes. The next one is the sales tax, the retail sales tax. And as you see, the home rule or the non-home rule sales tax is going down. The July is your April sales. So we'll have it continue to see a decrease May and June and then the 2020 tax, which is your blue with your blue, that's our 1% that we get even with groceries, because it's not the non-home rule, that has dipped a little bit. And looking at, and once again, that's April. So in March, everybody was still purchasing, stuff, even if the grocery, not the grocery stores, the other store, the restaurants were closing in the end of March. People were going out and buying groceries and going to your Target. So we're still okay. However, it is starting to dip now. So we anticipate, and speaking with a lot of the finance directors, these, the retail sales tax in both the non-home rule and the 1% is going to continue to go down until things open up. And then hopefully it'll go back up after that.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I know it's, we were all, we're not out of it, obviously, but to be down 1%, I think we expected a little bit worse. So I think the grocery stores must have just killed it, obviously. But we have other, our industrial landscaping, the Ozinga, we're only down 1% from the month last year. So it's, we'll see, but not terrible. So there's your positive.
No, but you have to think too, is that July is going to be at the end where the unemployment, that $600 a week extra is going to go away. So things could get, people aren't going to purchase in August probably if they don't have the money.
All right. Anything else on that or the pension? All right, we are getting to the end. Couple new business items are unfinished. I'll start, and then Jason's got one. With the quarry maintenance agreement with the Forge and the township, I think we're just going to go in a different route. And again, I don't want, the township, they see things differently than us right now on this one. And that's fine. They're a different board. In some instances, they represent different residents. I think it's fine. What we're going to do, just because I don't want it to be contentious, let's just move on. And we're going to work with the Forge on an addendum to our license agreement that'll just address standards for the maintenance that has already been talked about in the license agreement. So that's what we're working on, just with us and the Forge. That'll deal with the road. I'm sure you guys have been out there this weekend. The parking lot, there's punch list items left, but the parking lot will be fine. I don't think there's going to be a lack of parking issue. It was the first weekend, but there's a lot of parking out there, and I think we'll work over the next week or so with the Forge just to do a simple addendum to our license agreement that addresses, ways in which if the road isn't done, to our standard, that we can repair it and charge the Forge. There was a lot of traffic this weekend, so we'll see how the road holds up. But let's get the parks open. Let's let it be successful, and we'll kind of go from there. It's kind of how I want to handle it. So that's I'll circulate some documents when I get them, but obviously they were really busy this weekend, so we didn't really. But we're moving on it. Last thing, new business, couple quick items. Jason, if you're still there, I'll turn it over to to you and some of the requests we've been getting lately and on the outdoor dining. But Jason, you want to go through? I do have a map of where I think you're headed, but you're still on there, Jason. Go ahead.
Still here.
All right.
Yeah, as you've probably seen, outdoor dining over the past few months have been a huge success, and a lot of business owners have thanked the village board, staff for the flexibility we've shown with the outdoor dining through the pandemic. Because of that and enthusiasm, and we know this is probably here to stay for some time, folks may have seen that Chicago just changed its rules starting Friday. They're closing bars again. Everybody we're talking to is thinking about expanding their outdoor space. So in particular, I've worked with Andre at Bottles for a year or more. He's been looking at expanding some seating in front of his building, and especially since Paws and Claws left, it's directly in front of their space at the corner there on the Talcott Square parking lot. Now, this is village-owned property, this portion of the parking lot, and it's currently landscaped with some shrubs and a tree. And Andre had asked if he could remove the shrubs, relocate the tree, and extend the parking. The paver that you see in front of there now. Staff doesn't have a particular concern. We looked at it with PD, engineering, public works. There wasn't anything there underground that we're worried about, but I told Andre I'd want to make sure that the board's aware before we start expanding outdoor dining at that location. So if there's any concerns, let me know. If not, we'll continue to engage Andre and look for more outdoor.
Hey, Jason, can you someone point on the map where we're talking?
Yeah, George has the.
You know what, my mouse is, yeah, I'm about,
Okay.
it's right, you see 055, the pin by the southern part of that building. So Pollyanna's to the north.
Yeah.
So all the way down to the bottom, 2220 405 055.
Yeah, the side of the building, the side of the building, right? South side of the building.
Yeah.
So the west side.
That. You could see the parcel map kind of outlines a little oval shaped landscaped area. It's kind of brown because it's all just mulch and shrubs and whatnot. So it'd be right there.
Dave, it's the part that's in the parking lot.
Oh, so in front of 050 and 055.
Three spaces to the right of the white car.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where, right, Jason? That's where it's at, that little oval.
Yep, it's just that little piece, but since it was village-owned property, and Andre agreed to do all the work, and him and Jerry, that building's remarkable, and we had no concerns about the craftsmanship. We just wanted to make sure the board was aware before we said okay.
So I have one question, Jason, though, on this one. So why get rid of the shrubs? Why not just allow him to have more parking spots? Because it seems like we're having him do this work and spend the money. First of all, spend money that we have space elsewhere in this parking lot that he can use. And second of all, is that really how we want this building to be long-term with the removal of that landscape versus, because at some point they're going back inside. We're not going to be, come winter, we're not going to be outside. I just feel like it's nice how the landscaping is. Can't we just give them more parking spots instead?
He wants to have outdoor dining though, Dave. He
He
doesn't want more
wants
parking.
seating, not parking, Dave. And he wants it where it's brown, not where it's green.
I get it. What I'm saying is right now, Bottles and Pollyannas have taken over parking spots and made them outside seating, right?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think the idea is they don't want to give up any more parking, and they thought that this would be an opportunity to expand seating without losing parking.
It just seems to me like it's a shame to lose some landscaping when we have the other space. A couple parking spots, honestly, we're by there a lot. A couple parking spots to me is not going to affect them.
Now, Dave, me personally, what I kind of would like to see is a little bit of separation from Pollyanna Bottles, just so the tables aren't all throughout that area and have an actual boundary. He's going to have it where it's fenced off in that area so that people aren't walking around just drinking beer everywhere. it'll be it'll be a spot for them to be. So I feel like that would help a little bit with having a little bit more control on what's going on between the two facilities. And that's probably maybe what we could also then extend further down when we talk to other bars like Canal and whatever, where we can have a little bit more control if it's in an area where there's defined spaces.
Okay, I mean, I just think it's he's wasting his money, but what about 055? Are we allowing him to do anything on the side of the building yet? Because so far I haven't seen any seats there either.
Yeah, we certainly offered it to them when we expanded outdoor dining to everybody. I mentioned, that even in lieu of this last year, I said, why don't you put something along there? What I was told, just the grade doesn't work for them. I don't,
okay.
I haven't gone out and looked at it, but, we have offered it for sure.
Okay.
I've offered to put picnic tables out there and whatnot if they needed anything. He actually declined the picnic tables.
Okay. Well, if he's spending money, it just seems to me to be a waste, but that's fine. Where's he relocating that tree, by the way?
He'll coordinate with Ralph. That was Ralph at Public Works. That was his insistence. So I'll make sure he works with Ralph on that. I think in the general location, but
Okay.
insisted that they keep the tree.
Yep. Okay.
Is that it, Jason?
Yeah, that was all.
What about 127th?
Oh, that's it for Jason. Anything, that's it for, is that?
Oh yeah, that's for George.
Oh, okay. I thought that was
Last,
on the same page.
last item, it's a long meeting, longest Zoom meeting ever, but, no, we're, we get these requests pretty often, and I guess there was some type of petition. I haven't seen it, but I know Trustee Maher talked about getting some connectivity, between Rolling Meadows and Briarcliff west of the tollway. And so we actually did, I know Ralph has probably read through the study. We studied this probably 6 months ago because we heard some rumblings and we were always trying to connect residents. And so they've studied this, Ralph. You want to go through what, I mean, you hung in there all day. I got to give you some time here, but the results of the study and let's talk about it a little bit here as a group. Go ahead, Ralph.
Okay, so I haven't seen the petition either, but this came up back in 2018 with a resident from Briarcliff, Chris Gubala. I don't know if you guys know Chris, but his concern was connecting Rolling Meadows and Briarcliff across 127th there. And number one, it's a county highway, and the county, from experience, would not even think about approving that. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, great. So Chris said he wanted to take it further, so I did. And I hired Callaway to do the study. And they do not recommend a crosswalk across the county highway there at that location. And I don't either. I'm going to tell you right now, it's straight up dangerous. It's in a valley. That's heavy truck traffic that comes from 355 down to the refinery. If I lived in either one of those subdivisions and my village put up a crosswalk there, I would be rather upset because I think it's rather irresponsible to do that, to say it's okay to cross. But keep in mind that they cross there anyway. So all we would be doing is giving permission and accepting liability if something did happen, if we didn't make that a crosswalk. So the study did come back where they said if we wanted to, we can go to the top of the crest near closer to Smith Road, which is possible, but again, it's a Cook County highway and they're not going to approve it. Just from experience, I know they're not going to approve it. What we can do is submit an inquiry letter to the county. They're basically shut down right now. They're not doing anything, but we can do that. We can draft something and we can see if they would approve it there. And just take it from there if you guys wanted to. But that's my feelings on it. I've discussed it with Chief Mayton and Commander Mezek as well. And they both agree with me that that is a terrible place for a crossing. It would have to go through a turning lane and it's just not a good spot. And I've explained that to Chris Gubala a couple years ago, and then all of a sudden it got fired back up again. I don't know by who, but I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Yeah,
I'll agree with it.
Ralph, and thanks, though. And I think that when Dave talked to me about it too, is that, the other option would be, could you, since they're already crossing there, could you extend the sidewalk to the street? But then more I think about it, when you go out there, you're making it easier for someone to do something unsafe. So it's a tough one. I mean,
So guys, the petition has well over 100 signatures. I think they're at 150 to 200 signatures. This is an area, the south side, we put in a new park that's an area that's expanding, and Briar Cliff is isolated. So we have an
So
issue,
take the
right? Briar Cliff
petition to
comes,
Cook County.
no, these are village residents, Rick. So I think it should be
It's a Cook County road.
Rick, I think we should be working with them to try to find a
We
viable
can,
solution here.
we can recommend
We
that they
can- we
take it to Cook County to cross
got
their
it.
jurisdiction.
So, okay, so I guess I'm looking, you guys, we can have them. What is there anyone else has an opinion on this? Because if I'm the only one that feels that 100 and something residents that have a problem here are voicing a concern, and our answer is going to be, it's a Cook County issue, we're not going to do anything. When we're working very hard to put up a wall for 12 residents, it just seems not fair. And this is probably a cheaper solution. And I feel like there's probably something we can do. I feel like the answer isn't we can't do anything because Cook County says we can't. There's got to be something we can do.
Dave, did you say we put the wall up for 12 residents? That you don't think
I'm
that helps
saying-
out the whole Briarcliff subdivision?
No, we've had sound studies that says it doesn't help the whole subdivision, right? They came in and showed it. We had a picture. It was 12 homes that had a benefit on that. My point isn't on the wall, John. My point is on this. There's a
No, I know, but
brand new-
we're going back and forth here because you had a problem with the wall. So, I mean, regardless, I mean, the HOA supported the wall, right? And obviously, does the HOA support this crosswalk as well? If they do, then, are they willing, you were talking before, hey, put the liability back on them. What is the liability we would have to assume? Do we have any idea what that is?
it's
George or Ralph?
from a practice, I mean, it's just unsafe. And we want to help everybody, but that's-
Absolutely.
we did the study where, where could we do it safely? And the study comes back that says you shouldn't do it, but if you want to do it, you should do it to the west. So if we do it to the west, no one will use it over there, and it's still unsafe.
And that's what those studies bring, they'll tell you that it's possible. If you really want to do it, you can. But you
So
can't do it there. So again, I mean, if we want to send an inquiry letter to the county and see where they're at on it, we can. I want to help too. But I don't want to sacrifice, being irresponsible when something might happen there.
So where are we suggesting to the west to put it? I mean,
I think
We're not.
the highest point would probably make the most sense. I think I pull out of Rolling Meadows every day. Right there we're at Rolling Meadows is very low, and there is a crest there. Thinking about it, I think I'd like to see a crossing too, but I'd like to see it at the highest point so that whoever's crossing that street, at least they'll see what's coming each way
Yeah.
on 127th Street.
so that makes sense to me. I just can't see that high point on this map. I'm just asking where it's at.
Yeah.
No, and unfortunately, there's not a sidewalk either. So now we'd have to build a whole sidewalk all the way to Rolling Meadows. So that's a whole nother.
And
added.
that's the thing. So if we do what they recommend, put it at the top of the crest, what's gonna say those people are crossing where we're telling them to? They're just gonna go the easy route. They're gonna go right across 127 just like they are now. It's a catch-22, guys. It really is.
If they cross now, the liability is theirs. If we
Yes.
make it easy for them or mark it, the liability is ours. If we get Cook County to approve it, the liabilities is theirs.
And
That's what it's all about.
But one of the things that we talked about was just extending having a sidewalk, not necessarily going in. This is okay. I'm fine not talking about it anymore. If I'm the only one that's supporting it, then we can let the group know and they can go in and protest us.
I think,
with
Dave, I think we all
Dave,
support it.
I
Dave,
support
we
Dave.
all support it.
I'm one of the ones that signed it. I totally support it because I used to live there and I get the problem. But if it's a safety issue, like Ralph's saying, then we have a whole nother thing that we have to address. It's not that I don't support it.
Right.
The way to do it, guys, is put it into the capital to install the sidewalk, get a cost, and then you guys can rank it against other priorities that we have. I mean, but we gotta do it the right way if we're gonna do it, or you know, we should open up a conversation with Cook County just to take the road. If we're gonna start making major improvements.
Well,
and-
that's not gonna change the liability or the possibility of what could happen.
Yeah, I know.
It just means that we legally get to be responsible then. The only way to do it is to put the bridge over there like we talked about doing at the park. But then it won't be right where everybody wants to cross. So then we'll need a bridge wherever anybody wants to cross. We'll put three of them.
But Rick, I mean, if we're trying to make this intersection completely 100%, it doesn't require a bridge. It requires a light that allows you to basically, if you want to make it as safe as possible, it's a light there. You could also have a general crosswalk with, you know, there's signage that we see out there. I don't know how busy this road is. I don't know what all the solutions are. All I'm saying is I think it's a viable request that we can look into. That was my point. I've asked, I don't even know where the highest point is. So I'm just trying to figure out where is the highest point on here that I see the map. I don't even know what you're referencing when you say the highest point. I don't know where you're referencing.
The entrance into Briarcliff would be the highest point, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Which entrance? There's three entrances in the Briarcliff. So which
one
one is it?
It's the one just west of Rolling Meadows Drive, the first one. So you could put it there, but then there's is there a driveway there, or is that
is that the landscaping place right there?
Yep.
Okay, so and most of the people would be walking that way anyway, right? So if that's what we're talking about and that's our highest point, so then the request would be go to the curb, which or go to the street, the 127th, and then extend the sidewalk that's on 127th to Rolling Meadows Drive, right? That would be the request.
That would be my request.
Okay. Okay, so
Do we
I
know
think-
though if is that a land that we can even touch? Is it unincorporated? What is that piece of land? I didn't think we own. I don't think we don't have the right for that.
Yeah, so it's county it's county right away. So I mean, it is possible, you know, but again, well, first off, Dave, at no point did I ever just say that it's county issue and I just ignored it because I had it studied in 2018. So I just want to be clear on that. I mean, I wanted to help.
No, I
too.
wasn't talking about you.
But
No.
it's just, you know, just doing it just doesn't make me feel very good. Just making an issue go away because the people think that things are so easy, but they're not.
Okay.
That's just my feeling. But again, let's see what the county says. Let's see what the county will approve. And like Rick said, put the liability on the county. They say yes, we'll do it. You know, but I think that's where we have to start, guys.
Yeah, and that's fine with me. And we will at some point get an estimate. That's fine. I just don't want us to die when there's a significant number of people that see this as an issue. And it makes sense, especially because we just had our park district build one of our bigger parks in that area. And all those people from Briarcliff, it's an unsafe intersection that people are already crossing. So I feel the onus is on us to try to make it safer. Just ignoring it isn't making it safer. And people are still crossing that road. So how can we make it safer for them?
Dave, we hear you. Ralph, why don't we see what we can do? If we can move this to a safer, location farther west, I think let's do it if we can do it. I don't think anyone here does not support it. I think it's bottom line, it's a safety issue. And,
Right.
putting it in and acknowledging a safety issue might not be the smartest thing we ever do. And I think everyone acknowledges that. So.
Right. We'll see what the county comes back with and take it from there.
All right, sounds good. All right, next up.
That's all I got.
3.5 hours. We did the under.
Nobody has any other comment?
Yeah, don't we have a public comment section now?
Susan Donahue, you've been hanging around for 4 hours. Come on.
I've got a 2-hour report on mosquitoes.
How was the zip line, Jason? How about that? Come on, give us a report.
It was fantastic. I was really pleased. It was, I think I was the 5th one down on Friday. It was pretty awesome. I spent the whole day out there, got sunburned, and love every minute of it. Get out to the forge. It was great.
There you go.
And I tried it on the ropes. I could also report back that on the ropes is a good beer.
All right. Sounds good. Well, that's it, right, George? We all good?
That is it. We don't have, no, we have nothing. We're good.
No public section, no,
Nope, everyone's hand, and there's no hands up. So I think we're good.
well, with that being said, thanks everyone for hanging in there. Appreciate it. And we are adjourned for committee of the whole.